5,000 years ago, in the riverlands of southern Mesopotamia, someone pressed a reed into wet clay and left behind one of the oldest ideas ever written by human hands. Humanity was not born from nothing. It was shaped. It was formed. It was brought into existence through a strange mixture of earth, divine intention, and hidden purpose. In the Sumerian imagination, human beings did not simply appear as wandering animals who slowly learned to build cities. They were remembered as crafted beings, molded like clay in the hands of powers older than kings, older than temples, older than the first walls of Uruk rising against the desert sky. But what kind of memory is this? Was it only a myth of creation, a sacred story told to explain why people exist? Was it a poetic way of saying that humans belong to the earth, or was something more unsettling hidden inside the image of clay, something about identity, forgetting, and the fragile boundary between the human and the divine? The Sumerians lived in a world where clay was everywhere. Clay formed the walls of houses, clay sealed jars, clay carried contracts, hymns, prayers, royal inscriptions, school exercises, and myths. Clay was not dead matter. It was the material through which memory survived. A word spoken vanished into air. A word pressed into clay could outlive a kingdom. So when Sumerian stories describe humanity as formed from clay, the image carries a strange double meaning. Humans are made from the same substance that preserves memory, yet humans themselves forget. Clay tablets remember what living minds lose. Why would the earliest civilization to write down its myths imagine humanity as something shaped from the very material that could preserve forgotten truth? In the ancient cities of Sumer, life revolved around the temple. The temple was not simply a place of worship. It was an economic center, a storehouse, a political force, and a gateway between human society and the divine world. Cities such as Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, Lagash, and Ur held their own sacred traditions, their own patron deities, their own memories of how the world had been ordered. The people who served these temples were not just priests in the modern sense. They were ritual specialists, administrators, singers, scribes, and guardians of inherited knowledge. They maintained offerings, recorded grain, preserved hymns, copied myths, and watched the rhythms of the heavens and rivers. In that world, memory was not private. Memory belonged to the city. It belonged to the temple. It belonged to the gods. A person might remember his father's field, his mother's voice, the smell of barley bread, or the dust of a road after summer heat. But the great memories of existence, the origin of humanity, the organization of heaven and earth, the duties owed to the gods, were carried through ritual and text. And this is where the mystery begins to deepen. Sumerian creation traditions do not give one simple account of human origins. Different texts preserve different images, different theological concerns, different divine roles. Some traditions emphasize the wisdom, God Enki. Others involve mother goddesses associated with birth and formation. Later, Mesopotamian versions developed the idea that humans were created to relieve the gods of labor. What ancient texts describe is a sacred world in which humanity has a function within a cosmic order. What archaeologists know is that these ideas were written, copied, adapted, and preserved in scribal culture across many centuries. What historians believe is that these myths helped ancient communities explain why humans worked, suffered, served, built, worshipped, and died. What modern interpretations suggest is more psychological. Maybe the clay-born human is not only a body, maybe it is a being separated from a forgotten beginning, a creature made from earth, yet haunted by heaven. Imagine the scene, a dim room lit by oil lamps, a young scribe sitting cross-legged with a tablet on his palm. Outside, canals glimmer in the heat. Donkeys move through narrow streets. Workers carry baskets of mud brick. Temple towers rise like artificial mountains above the plain. The scribe copies ancient lines about gods, creation, and human destiny. He may not see himself as inventing anything. He is preserving something older than himself. But even preservation is not perfect. Clay breaks, tablets shatter, lines vanish, words become unreadable. Whole stories survive only in fragments. A myth can reach us with its beginning missing, its ending damaged, its central phrase uncertain. We hold pieces of a world that once felt complete. That brokenness matters, because the title of this mystery speaks of forgotten human memories and why they were erased. Yet in the world of Sumer, forgetting was not always an accident. Some knowledge belonged only in temples. Some rites belonged only to specialists. Some divine secrets were dangerous, not because they were false, but because they placed humans too close to the powers that ordered existence. Could the first forgotten memory be the memory of origin, not birth in the ordinary sense, not the moment one child opens its eyes, but the deeper origin, what humans are, why they exist, and who first named their purpose? The Sumerian image of clay suggests humility. Humans come from earth. They return to earth. Their bodies dry, crack, and disappear like unfired mud under the sun. Yet the same image suggests something extraordinary. Clay can be shaped. Clay can receive a mark. Clay can carry a message across thousands of years. A human being, in this symbolic reading, is a living tablet, marked by forces it does not fully remember, carrying impressions it did not choose. This does not mean the Sumerians taught a doctrine of erased memories in the modern sense. There is no single tablet saying humanity once possessed 7 memories that were deliberately removed. That would be invention, not history. But ancient Sumerian literature does preserve recurring patterns, creation from clay, divine knowledge, sacred powers, lost conditions, underworld journeys, broken communication, flood destruction, and the fragile survival of memory through writing. When these patterns are placed side by side, they create a haunting question. Why are humans described as beings made by the gods, yet separated from divine knowledge? Why do stories show gods possessing wisdom, names, destinies, powers, and decrees that humans can glimpse but not fully own? Why does civilization appear as a gift that can be transferred, guarded, stolen, or lost? Perhaps the first memory was not erased by violence. Perhaps it was buried inside myth. A story can hide what a command cannot say directly. A symbol can survive when doctrine disappears. A clay tablet can preserve a mystery long after the temple that produced it has fallen into dust. In the ruins of Sumer, archaeology gives us bricks, tablets, seals, statues, graves, canals, and temple platforms. Myth gives us another kind of ruin fragments of how ancient people imagined the unseen structure of existence. Between the two stands the human figure, formed from clay, standing beneath heaven, asking why it was made. And the most unsettling part is this: the Sumerians did not imagine humans as creators of their own destiny in the modern sense. Humanity entered a world already organized by powers beyond itself. The gods had names, the cities had patrons, the rivers had rhythms, the temples had duties, the dead had needs, the sky had signs. Human life began inside a memory older than the individual. But if humans were shaped inside a cosmic order, why do they not remember entering it? Why must every generation be taught again who the gods are, what the rituals mean, why the dead require offerings, why kingship descends, why writing matters, why the city must be maintained against chaos? Maybe that is the first wound of humanity in the Sumerian imagination, not death, not labor, not suffering, but forgetting. To be human is to awaken in the middle of a story whose first lines are missing. The clay remembers, the temples remember, the gods remember, but the human being must search. And if the first forgotten memory is the memory of being shaped from sacred earth, then the next mystery becomes even stranger. What hidden wisdom was believed to exist before humanity opened its eyes? In the oldest sacred imagination of southern Mesopotamia, wisdom did not begin in the sky. It slept beneath the waters, long before the great cities filled with scribes, merchants, priests, and kings. Sumerian tradition placed one of its most mysterious divine powers in the deep, not in an underworld of the dead, and not in a distant heaven beyond the stars, but in a hidden watery realm called the Abzu. This was the domain of Enki. To later readers, Enki can seem almost impossible to define. He is a god of wisdom, fresh water, magic, creation, fertility, craft, cleverness, and hidden knowledge. He is the lord of the deep, the keeper of plans, the one who understands secret words and divine mechanisms. He is often generous, often cunning, sometimes unpredictable. He can save humanity, deceive other gods, release powers, or withhold them. But the strangest part is where his wisdom lives, beneath the visible world, not in sunlight, not in open speech, not in the marketplace where people trade grain and wool. Enki's wisdom comes from a depth that humans cannot simply walk into. What if the ancient Sumerians imagined true knowledge as something submerged? The land of Sumer depended on water, yet water was never simple. The Tigris and Euphrates could nourish fields, fill canals, and feed cities. They could also flood, destroy, rot foundations, and erase boundaries. Water was life and danger at the same time. A farmer understood this. A priest understood it. A king understood it. Without water, the city died. With too much water, the city drowned. So when a god of wisdom is placed in the deep waters, the image is more than geography. It is a statement about knowledge itself. Wisdom gives life. Wisdom can also overwhelm. The Abzu was not merely a pool or a river. In Sumerian religious imagination, it was a cosmic depth, a hidden source from which fresh waters emerged. Temples could contain symbolic basins that evoked sacred waters. Ritual purification depended on water. The divine world was not separated from material life. A canal, a spring, a temple basin, and a mythic ocean could become connected through sacred thought. Enki's most famous city was Eridu, remembered as one of the oldest cities in southern Mesopotamia. Archaeology shows that Eridu was an important early religious center with a long sequence of temple building, layer after layer, shrine after shrine. The site suggests continuity, rebuilding, devotion, and deep memory. To stand among its ruins in the imagination is to see a city not as a collection of houses, but as a sacred machine built around divine presence. Dust moves across the plain. Broken mud bricks sink back into earth. The vanished temple still seems to hold an absence. In Sumerian tradition, Eridu was not just old, it was primeval. It belonged to the beginning of order. The city's connection with Enki gives it the atmosphere of a place where wisdom first entered the human world, but not as something ordinary people could fully possess. This is where the second forgotten memory begins to take shape. Not the memory of physical origin, but the memory of hidden wisdom. A human being may work, eat, dream, desire, and fear, yet still sense that the world contains patterns just beyond reach. Why do certain rituals matter? Why do words spoken in a sacred setting have power? Why do dreams arrive with symbols nobody invited? Why does water cleanse not only the body, but the boundary between ordinary life and divine danger? Ancient texts describe Enki as a possessor of deep knowledge. He understands decrees, crafts, life-giving forces, and magical acts. Archaeologists know that water, temple ritual, and purification were central features of Mesopotamian religious life. Historians believe Enki's character reflects the importance of irrigation, technical skill, priestly knowledge, and creative intelligence in Sumerian civilization. Modern interpretation can go one step further. Carefully, Enki may represent the idea that human consciousness rests on hidden depths. There is the surface mind, the part that speaks, bargains, counts, builds, and remembers daily tasks. Beneath it is something older and more powerful: dream, instinct, symbol, fear, imagination, and intuition. The Sumerians did not describe the unconscious in modern psychological language, but their myths often place decisive knowledge below the obvious world. Why would wisdom sleep? In some traditions, Enki is shown as inactive or withdrawn until awakened by crisis. This is a striking image. The wisdom needed to restore order is present, but not immediately active. It must be called upon. It must be approached. It may even be disturbed. This pattern appears again and again in human cultures. A hidden god, a sleeping king, a sealed book, a buried chamber, a lost word, a secret beneath water. These images endure because they touch something deep in the human mind, the suspicion that what we need most is already somewhere within the world, but inaccessible. Could forgetting be a kind of separation from the Abzu, not a literal memory erased from the brain, but a sacred distance between ordinary humanity and the depths of wisdom that formed civilization? The farmer knows how to guide water through canals, but not the divine design of water itself. The scribe knows how to press signs into clay, but not why language has power. The priest knows the ritual, but perhaps not the original moment when the ritual first became necessary. This is not failure. It may be part of the human condition. In Sumerian stories, humans are rarely equal to the gods. They may receive gifts, commands, warnings, and fragments of divine order, but the whole pattern remains beyond them. The gods possess knowledge at a scale humans cannot carry. That idea is both humbling and terrifying, because if knowledge exists in the deep and humans live at the surface, then civilization itself becomes an act of partial remembering. Every canal, temple, hymn, seal, and tablet is a small attempt to draw water from the hidden source. But no canal can drain the Abzu. No tablet can contain the full mind of Enki. A night scene rises from the ancient city. The temple is quiet. A priest washes his hands in sacred water. A scribe recites words learned from older tablets. The moon reflects in a basin. Somewhere beyond the walls, irrigation channels whisper through the darkness. To the people of Sumer, this was not merely nature. It was contact with a depth beneath appearances. But if Enki guarded wisdom below the world, why were humans given only fragments of it? Why allow civilization to rise, but keep its deepest meanings hidden? Maybe the second forgotten memory is the memory of the deep itself, the knowledge that human life floats above a vast unseen intelligence, close enough to sustain us, yet distant enough to remain mysterious. And if wisdom was hidden beneath the waters, then another question begins to surface from the clay who first taught humans the words that could reach it. What is a human being without a name? To the modern mind, a name can feel like a sound attached to a body, a label used by family, friends, officials, and strangers. It can be changed. It can be shortened. It can be forgotten by someone who never cared enough to remember it. But in the ancient world of Sumer, a name was not merely a convenience. A name carried presence. A name preserved identity. A name could outlive the body. In the oldest cities of Mesopotamia, names were carved into clay, stamped into seals, sung in hymns, and invoked in prayers. Kings fought to make their names endure. Builders placed inscriptions in foundations so future generations would know who raised a temple wall. Scribes copied the names of gods with care, because divine names were not casual words. They were tied to rank, power, memory, and sacred relationship. To erase a name was not just to remove information. It was to attack existence. This is where the third forgotten memory begins to emerge, the memory of the true name. Not a secret name in the sense of fantasy, but the deeper question of whether humans once understood themselves through sacred naming. Who named humanity? Who gave each person a place in the order of things? And what happens when a people can still speak, trade, marry, build, and fight, but no longer remembers the meaning of its own name? Ancient Mesopotamian texts often treat naming as an act of authority. To name something is to recognize it, define it, and place it within a world of relationships. Cities have names, temples have names, gods have names and titles. Rivers, fields, stars, gates, statues, and offices can all be named. A thing without a name is unfinished, unclaimed, or not fully brought into order. The act of naming turns chaos into meaning. Imagine a newborn in a Sumerian household. The child enters a world already full of names, the household gods, the family lineage, the city deity, the reigning king, the local temple, the canals, the fields, the ancestors whose memory still matters. The child's name may express hope, devotion, gratitude, protection, or relationship to a god. In many ancient Mesopotamian names, the divine is woven directly into identity. A person is not isolated. A person is named inside a network of seen and unseen powers. What if identity was once remembered as something received, not invented? This is not how many people think today. Modern identity often feels personal, flexible, private, and self-made. But in Sumer, identity was bound to household, city, temple, occupation, kinship, deity, and ritual duty. You did not stand alone beneath the sky. You stood inside a pattern. A name told the world where you belonged. And yet, names are fragile, clay tablets break, languages die, gods are renamed by later cultures, cities are buried beneath wind-blown sand. A king who believed his name would last forever may survive only as damaged signs on a fragment in a museum drawer. Thousands of ordinary people are gone completely. Their voices vanished, their faces unknown, their names never written, or written once and lost. The Sumerians understood this terror. They lived with the hunger for remembrance. Royal inscriptions often reveal a deep desire for future readers. A king builds, dedicates, restores, and then asks that his name be honored. He fears that someone may destroy his inscription or replace it. This fear tells us something profound. Ancient rulers did not only want power during life, they wanted memory after death. Why? Because to be forgotten was a second death. For ordinary people, the problem was even sharper. Most human lives did not become hymns. Most names did not become monuments. The dead depended on descendants, offerings, and ritual remembrance. A forgotten ancestor could become restless. A neglected dead person could trouble the living. Memory was not sentimental. It had consequences. Here, mythology and social reality touch. If the gods are known by many names and titles, and kings fight to preserve their names, and the dead require remembrance, then the human name becomes a vessel. It holds identity across time. It connects the living and the dead. It allows a person to be called, mourned, cursed, blessed, recorded, or restored to thought. But what if the deepest human name has been lost? Not the personal name given at birth, the older name, the name of what humans are. Ancient creation traditions describe humans as shaped for a role in a divine economy. Different texts offer different divine actors and meanings, but the pattern is clear enough to disturb the modern listener. Humanity is not random in these stories. Humanity is assigned a place. Humans are formed within purpose. Yet the human beings inside history do not seem to remember this clearly. They must be instructed. They must be governed. They must be watched by gods, kings, omens, laws, rituals, and scribes. They build temples to maintain relationships whose beginnings are already ancient to them. This creates a strange gap. The gods know what humans are called. Humans inherit the name, but not the full memory behind it. Modern interpretation might say that this reflects the human search for identity. Every civilization tries to answer the same question. Who are we, biological creatures? Servants of gods, children of earth, bearers of breath, citizens of cities, souls awaiting judgment, accidents in a vast universe. The answer changes across cultures, but the ache behind the question does not change. A name is the shortest answer to the question of being. Lose the answer, and the question grows wild. In Sumerian myth, names also connect to power through speech. Words spoken correctly in ritual could matter. Divine commands could shape reality. Praise could sustain relationship with the gods. Lamentation could call attention to ruin. A curse could damage memory. A blessing could extend life and honor. The spoken and written name stood at the boundary between presence and absence. Picture a scribe in Nippur copying a list of divine names. The signs are small, careful, repetitive. To an outsider, the tablet might look like administration or schoolwork, but beneath that quiet labor lies something enormous, the belief that the world can be ordered by preserving names. A world without names is not freedom. It is dissolution. So perhaps the third forgotten memory is the memory of being named, the memory that identity was once understood as a sacred inheritance. To forget the true name is to become visible but uncertain, alive but uprooted, speaking but unable to answer the oldest question: who called humanity into meaning? And if names could preserve identity against time, why did so many of humanity's most important names vanish into broken clay? Why would gods need workers? The question sounds almost impossible at first. A god is supposed to be powerful. A god commands storms, waters, fertility, kingship, destiny, and the hidden structure of the world. A god should not become tired like a canal digger beneath the burning sun. A god should not complain like a laborer carrying baskets of mud. And yet, in Mesopotamian creation traditions, one of the most unsettling ideas appears again and again. Humanity is created in connection with labor, not merely life, not merely beauty, not merely wonder, labor. In some later Akkadian traditions, especially in stories that develop older Mesopotamian themes, humans are fashioned so the gods no longer have to perform exhausting work themselves. This does not mean every Sumerian text says the same thing in the same way. Ancient Mesopotamian mythology was not a single fixed book. It was a living collection of traditions, copied, reshaped, translated, expanded, and reimagined across cities and centuries. But the pattern is powerful. The gods desire relief. Humanity appears, work begins. This may be the fourth forgotten memory, the memory of divine labor. Not the memory that humans were slaves in a simple modern sense, and not proof of a hidden historical event. That would go beyond the evidence. The ancient accounts belong to myth, ritual imagination, and theology. But the symbolism is sharp enough to cut through thousands of years. What if human beings remembered work before they remembered freedom? To understand why this mattered, picture the Sumerian landscape. Southern Mesopotamia was rich, but it was not easy. The land could be astonishingly productive, yet only through coordination. Fields needed irrigation, canals needed digging, channels needed clearing, dikes needed repair, grain needed measuring, animals needed tending, temples needed offerings, cities needed walls, bricks needed shaping from mud and straw. Civilization did not rise there as a dream floating above nature. It rose through organized labor. Every city was a machine of work. Farmers, herders, fishermen, potters, weavers, brewers, boatmen, metalworkers, builders, priests, scribes, and administrators each played a role. The temple and palace gathered, stored, redistributed, commanded, recorded, and remembered. Labor was not only economic, it was sacred and political. The human body became part of the city's rhythm. Hands cut reeds, feet pressed clay, shoulders carried loads, eyes watched water levels, voices recited duties. A person could feel the weight of the cosmos in the weight of a basket. This is why the mythic link between humanity and labor feels so revealing. Ancient people were not inventing labor as an abstract concept. They lived inside it. They saw that survival required endless repetition. If canals were neglected, fields died. If offerings stopped, divine favor might fail. If records were lost, order collapsed. If workers disappeared, the city weakened. Labor was the price of order. But why place this burden at the center of human origin? Ancient texts describe a universe where gods have needs, temples require service, and humans maintain the bond between heaven and earth. Archaeologists know that early Mesopotamian cities were built on complex systems of production and administration. Historians often understand these creation stories as reflections of social organization, where work, hierarchy, offering, and divine service were woven together. Modern interpretation can ask a more intimate question. Did the Sumerians encode in myth the feeling that human life begins already indebted? A child is born into hunger, obligation, family, field, city, and death. No one chooses the canals. No one chooses the need for bread. No one chooses the body's dependence on water and grain. Life arrives with tasks waiting. The world is already demanding. The myth says, in sacred language, what every laborer knows in the bones you awaken into work you did not invent. There is something haunting about that. The worker in the field may look toward the temple tower and wonder why the gods receive offerings while humans sweat. The priest may answer that service sustains cosmic balance. The scribe may record the grain ration and the work crew. The king may claim he builds for the gods. The myth may declare that this is how the world was meant to be. But the human heart may still ask another question. Was labor a gift of participation or a burden placed upon clay? Sumerian literature does not reduce human beings to machines. It also preserves songs, laments, love poetry, wisdom, praise, grief, friendship, and longing. Human life in Mesopotamian imagination was not only toil, yet labor remained central because labor linked humanity to survival and service. The body worked because the world required maintenance. That idea becomes more mysterious when connected with memory. If humans were created into labor, why do they not remember the original agreement? Why do people feel the burden, but not the moment when the burden was assigned? Why does work seem both natural and strangely unfair, both meaningful and exhausting? A man in ancient Lagash might spend his life clearing canals, hauling reeds, or shaping bricks for a temple he did not design. He may believe his work pleases the gods. He may also feel the ache in his hands at night. Between devotion and fatigue lies one of the oldest human contradictions. What if the forgotten memory of labor is not about resentment, but about lost purpose? Work without meaning becomes punishment. Work with sacred meaning becomes service. But when the memory of purpose fades, only the weight remains. This may be why the ancient image is so powerful. The gods are relieved, but humans are burdened. Civilization rises, but the individual body pays. Temples shine, but mud remains under fingernails. The city calls this order. The worker calls it life. And somewhere inside the myth, a question remains unanswered. Was humanity made because the world needed caretakers, or because the gods wanted servants? The difference is enormous. A caretaker belongs to the world and helps sustain it. A servant belongs to power and obeys. Mesopotamian traditions can hold both possibilities at once. Humans serve the gods, but they also keep the cosmic household alive. They are small yet necessary, mortal yet central, dust-born yet entrusted with the maintenance of sacred order. This is not a simple humiliation, it is a dangerous dignity, because if humans were made to work, then human labor is not meaningless. Every canal, brick, hymn, harvest, and offering becomes part of a larger structure. But if the reason for labor has been forgotten, then humanity becomes trapped in action without understanding. The fourth forgotten memory may be the memory of why effort matters, not just that humans work, why they must, why the world seems to demand their strength from birth until death, and why the earliest stories dared to imagine that even the gods once wanted relief from the burden humans now carry. If labor was woven into human destiny, who placed breath inside the worker's body and made clay rise from the ground? What enters the body when clay becomes alive? The question sits quietly behind the oldest human stories. A body can be shaped, a statue can be carved, a figure can be molded from earth and given eyes, limbs, mouth, and hands. But until something invisible enters it, the form remains silent. It does not hunger, it does not speak, it does not remember. In ancient Mesopotamian thought, life was not explained in modern biological language. The Sumerians did not speak of cells, nerves, oxygen, or brain activity. They lived in a world where breath, blood, sound, ritual, divine command, and bodily presence were woven into a single mystery. To be alive was not merely to function. It was to participate in a world ordered by powers greater than the human body. This is where another forgotten memory appears, the memory of animation. Not the memory of being born from a mother, but the deeper mystery of how lifeless matter becomes a living person. The Sumerian world was full of crafted forms. Statues of gods stood inside temples. Figurines served ritual purposes. Cylinder seals pressed images into clay like small, moving worlds. Human hands shaped material constantly. Mud became brick. Reed became mat. Wool became cloth. Metal became blade or ornament. Clay became tablet. But human life remained different. A statue might have eyes. A living person sees. A statue might have a mouth. A living person speaks. A tablet might preserve words. A living person suffers from them. The ancient imagination often treated breath and life as closely connected. Across many cultures, breath becomes a sign of animation because it is visible and invisible at once. It can be felt, but not held. It leaves the body at death. Yet while present, it moves the chest and carries speech. The Sumerian and broader Mesopotamian traditions contain complex ideas about life force, ghostly existence, and the dead. But they do not present one simple modern doctrine of a detachable soul as later religions might define it. That distinction matters. What ancient texts describe is a world in which life comes through divine action and the body remains connected to earth, family, ritual, and destiny. What archaeologists know is that burial practices, offerings, grave goods, and funerary texts show concern for the dead and their continued condition. What historians believe is that Mesopotamians saw death not as disappearance into nothing, but as a transition into a shadowed existence requiring remembrance and care. Modern interpretation can look at the body in these myths and ask, did ancient people sense that life is a borrowed fire? A person wakes each morning, moves through the city, eats bread, drinks beer, speaks to neighbors, worships, works, desires, fears, dreams, and ages. Yet no one can point to the exact moment where matter becomes self. The body is visible, but consciousness is not. The breath is felt, but the source of awareness remains hidden. Could this be why the living body felt sacred and vulnerable at the same time? In the temple world, divine statues could undergo rituals that made them fit for divine presence. These rituals did not mean the craftsmen believed they had merely built a decorative object. The statue could become a focus of presence, care, feeding, clothing, washing, and devotion. Human beings, too, were cared for through washing, feeding, naming, clothing, and ritual obligations. The boundary between form and presence mattered deeply. Imagine a craftsman smoothing clay into a human figure. The shape looks complete, but everyone knows it is not alive. Then imagine a newborn drawing breath for the first time. The difference between the two moments is immeasurable. One is an object. The other is a cry that changes a household forever. What is that difference? The ancient answer was not mechanical. It was sacred. The fifth forgotten memory may be the memory of the breath hidden in the body, the awareness that life is not owned but received. Human beings move as if life belongs to them, yet sickness, sleep, trance, injury, and death reveal how fragile that possession is. A body can lose speech. A body can lose memory. A body can lie still while others call its name. Something essential can withdraw. This made the body a threshold, not merely a container, a threshold between earth and something unseen. In Mesopotamian laments, prayers, and rituals, the body appears as a place where divine favor or divine anger can be felt. Disease could be interpreted through spiritual, ritual, or supernatural frameworks, though practical healing also existed. A sufferer might seek incantation, medicine, purification, or divine mercy. The human body was never isolated from the cosmos. Pain could have meaning. Breath could be threatened by forces beyond human control. To modern ears, this may sound fearful, but it also reveals a profound intuition. The body remembers what the mind forgets. The body remembers hunger before language. The body remembers rhythm before thought. The body remembers fear before explanation. The body remembers death even while the mind refuses it. Perhaps this is why ancient people placed so much importance on ritual actions involving the body washing, anointing, dressing, bowing, raising hands, lamenting, eating offerings, pouring libations. These were not empty gestures. They were ways of teaching the body its place in a sacred order. A person could forget a myth. The body still kneels. A person could doubt a god. The body still trembles in sickness. A person could ignore death. The body still ages. The forgotten memory of breath is not a doctrine hidden on one tablet. It is a pattern spread across creation stories, temple rituals, funerary concern, healing practices, and the sheer ancient astonishment that clay can stand upright and speak. But this memory may have been erased in a subtler way than destruction. It may have been buried by familiarity. Nothing is more mysterious than life, yet nothing becomes ordinary faster. Every morning the breath returns, and because it returns, humans stop asking where it came from. The Sumerians did not have modern science, but they had wonder. They looked at the living body and saw a fragile meeting place of earth, divine order, and invisible force. They understood that a person is not only shaped matter, a person is matter awakened, and that awakening creates a responsibility. If breath is received, then life is not merely possession, it is trust. But who gives that trust? The gods, the deep waters, the mother goddess, the cosmic order, the ancestors. The mystery changes form depending on the text and city, but the question remains alive beneath every ancient image. A body without breath is clay returning to clay. A body with breath becomes a worker, singer, lover, mourner, builder, rebel, dreamer, and witness. So why would such a being, animated by invisible life, remain unable to remember the source of its own animation? If clay can be given breath, could breath also be given knowledge? What if civilization was not invented, but received? The idea feels strange because the modern world likes to imagine progress as a staircase built by human effort alone. First people learned to plant. Then they built villages, then cities, then writing, kingship, law, mathematics, astronomy, music, and temples appeared through slow discovery and practical need. Archaeology does show long development. Farming, settlement, trade, craft specialization, administration, and urban life did not appear in one instant. They emerged through centuries of adaptation. Human beings experimented, failed, rebuilt, and learned. But Sumerian myth speaks in another language. It speaks of sacred powers. It speaks of divine offices. It speaks of the mysterious things called the Me. The Me are among the most fascinating concepts in Sumerian literature. They are difficult to translate because they do not fit neatly into one modern word. They can be described as divine powers, cultural ordinances, sacred principles, or cosmic functions. They include things that make civilization possible: kingship, priesthood, truth, judgment, craft, music, sexuality, power, lamentation, weapons, wisdom, and the ordered patterns of social life. They are not simply objects. They are not exactly laws. They are more like invisible blueprints that allow the world of humans to operate. This may be the sixth forgotten memory, the memory of civilization's divine design. In the myth of Inanna and Enki, the goddess Inanna travels to Eridu, the city of Enki, lord of wisdom and the deep waters. She visits him, feasts with him, and receives many Me from him. Then she carries them away to her city, Uruk. Enki later regrets what has happened and sends beings to recover them, but Inanna succeeds in bringing these powers to Uruk. The story is rich, playful, strange, and difficult. It is not a simple political report. It is myth. Yet myth can preserve the emotional truth of cultural rivalry, sacred authority, and the mysterious transfer of civilization from one holy center to another. Why would a city need to possess the powers of civilization? Because in the ancient Mesopotamian imagination, a city was not just a crowded place, it was an ordered universe. A true city required temples, rituals, offices, crafts, festivals, songs, hierarchy, law, sexuality, warfare, mourning, wisdom, and divine protection. Without these, buildings alone did not make civilization. A city had to be activated. The Me were the hidden activators. Picture Uruk under a copper-colored sunset. The temple precinct rises above the flat land. Workers move through gateways. Priests prepare offerings. Women sing sacred songs. Scribes mark tablets. Merchants count goods. Brewers stir vats. Metalworkers strike tools. Lamentation priests preserve sorrow in formal sound. Judges hear disputes. Kings claim divine favor. Every human action seems ordinary when viewed separately. But together, they form something astonishing. Civilization. The Sumerians looked at this complexity and asked, in their own sacred language, where did all of this come from? The myth answers from divine power, but the answer creates a new problem. If civilization depends on powers granted by the gods, then humans do not fully own civilization. They steward it, they perform it, they may even misuse it. Kingship can order a city, but it can also become tyranny. Music can praise the gods, but it can also seduce. Weapons can protect, but also destroy. Speech can preserve truth, but also deceive. Sexuality can generate life, but also disorder. Lamentation can heal grief, but also keep pain alive. The me are not gentle gifts. They are dangerous gifts. Modern interpretation can see in them one of humanity's oldest reflections on culture itself. Civilization gives humans power beyond the animal body. It lets memory survive through writing, food grow through irrigation, cities rise through labor, identity endure through names, law restrain violence, and ritual connect the visible with the invisible. But civilization also multiplies desire, conflict, ambition, inequality, and fear. What if the forgotten memory is not that humans were once uncivilized, but that civilization itself was once understood as sacred and perilous? To forget this memory is to treat culture as merely human machinery. Offices become bureaucracy, ritual becomes habit, law becomes paperwork, music becomes entertainment, writing becomes storage, kingship becomes politics. The sacred pattern disappears, but the powers remain active. That may be the most dangerous situation of all. A people can inherit the me without remembering their source. A society can use power without remembering why it was given boundaries. The story of Inanna carrying the me to Uruk also introduces another mystery. Civilization can move. Sacred power can be transferred from one center to another. Eridu may be ancient, but Uruk becomes radiant. Wisdom may sleep in the deep, but ambition carries it into the city of desire, kingship, and monumental life. Inanna is not a passive receiver. She is bold, beautiful, dangerous, strategic, and alive with force. She takes civilization's powers into motion. Through her, culture becomes dramatic. It travels. It risks conflict. It cannot remain hidden forever in the depths. This is important because it changes the meaning of forgotten memory. Knowledge is not erased only by loss. Sometimes it is transformed by movement. A sacred principle leaves one city and enters another. A ritual changes language. A myth is copied by a new scribe. A divine power becomes political authority. A temple symbol becomes royal propaganda. Something survives, but not unchanged. Is that preservation or erasure? The me reveal that Sumerian civilization knew itself to be made of invisible structures. The people of Mesopotamia did not simply live inside customs. They mythologized customs as divine realities. They saw that human society depends on roles no single person invented, patterns no individual can fully understand, and powers that can bless or destroy depending on how they are handled. This is why the me feels strangely modern. A city today also runs on invisible codes, laws, money, credentials, borders, ceremonies, contracts, archives, titles, schedules, signals, passwords, and myths of legitimacy. Remove these invisible patterns, and the buildings remain, but the civilization collapses. The Sumerians gave those patterns divine names. They imagined them as sacred powers that could be possessed, transferred, lost, or stolen. But why would such powers be kept in the hands of gods at all? Why not give humans full understanding from the beginning? Perhaps because civilization is too powerful for unconscious beings. Perhaps because culture requires memory to remain humane. Perhaps because when people forget that institutions are sacred responsibilities, they turn them into tools of appetite. The sixth forgotten memory may be the memory that civilization was never neutral. Every law carries a vision of order. Every ritual carries a memory of relationship. Every office carries a shadow of power. Every song carries a force that shapes the soul. And every city is built not only from bricks, but from invisible powers that people must remember how to honor. The ancient myth does not tell us that the me were historical objects hidden in a temple chest. It tells us something more haunting. The world humans call civilization may be held together by forces they barely understand. And if civilization itself was a sacred power, what happens when those who inherit it forget the rules of its use? Can a city remember heaven? The question seems impossible until we enter the world of ancient Uruk. In the dust-colored plains of southern Mesopotamia, Uruk rose as one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world. Its walls, temples, workshops, streets, storerooms, and sacred precincts were more than architecture. To the people who lived there, the city was not merely a human invention. It was a meeting place between earth and the divine order. A city could be planned, a city could be built, but a sacred city had to mean something. Uruk became one of the great symbols of that meaning. It was associated with Inanna, the powerful goddess of love, warfare, desire, kingship, and terrifying transformation. It was also linked with An, the sky god, whose presence connected the city to heaven itself. In this environment, walls did not simply defend bodies, temples did not simply house rituals, streets did not simply guide movement. The whole city became a kind of visible memory, a memory of heaven pressed into earth. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that civilization once tried to mirror the cosmos. Modern people often think of cities as practical structures. People gather for trade, protection, labor, administration, and opportunity. Roads connect neighborhoods. Markets distribute goods. Officials manage rules. Buildings serve functions. A city is useful. But ancient Mesopotamian cities were also sacred diagrams. A temple stood at the center, not only because religion was important, but because the divine presence was believed to stabilize the human world. The temple was a house of the god or goddess. Offerings were brought as if the deity truly belonged there. Food, drink, clothing, music, incense, and ritual attention maintained the relationship. The sacred image was not decoration. It was treated as a living focus of divine presence. What if the earliest city was not only a settlement, but a ritual memory machine? Think of Uruk at dawn. The flat horizon begins to glow. Temple platforms rise from the city like mountains made by human hands. Workers carry baskets. Priests move through courtyards. Scribes sit with tablets. Women grind grain. Merchants open storage jars. Oxen pull loads through gates. The city wakes not as a random crowd, but as a patterned organism. Every role belongs somewhere. Every offering follows a rhythm. Every festival returns at the appointed time. Every gate separates one space from another. Every wall marks a boundary between ordered life and the dangerous outside. In Sumerian thought, order had to be maintained. The world was not guaranteed to remain stable on its own. Chaos pressed at the edges, flood, drought, enemy armies, disease, famine, broken ritual, angry gods, restless dead. The city answered chaos through structure. It organized labor, memory, worship, authority, and time. This is where Uruk becomes more than a place. It becomes an argument. The city says human life can be arranged according to a higher pattern. The temple says the gods may dwell among humans if properly honored. The wall says order must be protected. The tablet says memory can resist disappearance. The festival says time itself can be renewed. Ancient texts describe cities as gifts, seats of divine power, and stages where gods and kings interact. Archaeologists see Uruk as a major urban center whose scale, administrative complexity, monumental architecture, and writing traditions shape the development of Mesopotamian civilization. Historians understand Uruk as one of the places where urban life reached a new intensity, changing how humans worked, worshipped, recorded, and imagined power. Modern interpretation can ask a more symbolic question. Did Uruk preserve a human memory of living inside sacred order? Many people today experience cities as noise, speed, loneliness, and survival. The city can feel artificial, disconnected from nature, filled with strangers and systems. But ancient Uruk suggests a different possibility. A city could be a cosmic arrangement, a place where heaven, earth, labor, ritual, desire, and authority were woven into one living structure. That does not mean Uruk was peaceful or equal. Ancient cities had hierarchy, control, poverty, conflict, and fear. Sacred order could justify power. Temples and palaces could command labor. Kings could claim divine support for earthly authority. A city that remembers heaven can also use heaven to discipline its people. This is the tension that makes the memory dangerous. If a city mirrors the cosmos, who decides what the cosmos wants? The priest, the king, the scribe, the goddess, the myth. In Uruk, sacred memory was not abstract. It was visible in brick and ritual. The Iana precinct, associated with Inanna, became one of the city's great sacred centers. Inanna herself was not a quiet, domestic goddess. She brought desire, battle, ambition, beauty, and upheaval. A city under her presence could not be only orderly. It had to pulse with danger and vitality. That makes Uruk different from a simple model of control. It remembered heaven, but heaven was not calm. Heaven contained storms of desire. Divine favor could elevate a king or abandon him. Sacred power could bless a city or tear it open. Inanna's presence made civilization radiant, but never safe. What if humans forgot that order and danger belonged together? Modern civilization often wants the benefits of the ancient city without its warnings. It wants power without ritual humility. It wants administration without sacred restraint. It wants desire without consequence. It wants walls without asking who remains outside them. It wants memory without responsibility. The ancient city did not solve these problems, but it dramatized them. Uruk held them in stone, clay, song, and myth. A person walking through its streets might feel small beneath temple walls, yet also protected by them. He might see divine statues carried in festival procession and feel that the invisible world had become visible for a moment. She might hear hymns to Inanna and sense that passion, war, fertility, and kingship were not separate forces, but different faces of one terrifying divine energy. This is the forgotten memory of the sacred city human beings once built their world, as if every structure answered an unseen pattern. A gate was not only an entrance, a temple was not only a building, a city was not only a population, it was a map of meaning. But maps can be misread. Sacred order can become political domination. Divine memory can become official narrative. A city can claim to mirror heaven while hiding suffering in its shadows. The same walls that preserve order can imprison the imagination. So why did the Sumerians keep returning to the city as the center of divine human life? Perhaps because outside the city was not freedom alone, it was uncertainty. The wilderness, the steppe, the floodplain, the foreign army, the broken canal, the abandoned shrine. To build a city was to resist dissolution. To maintain a temple was to insist that the world still had a center. And maybe that is why the memory was forgotten. Not because the city vanished. Cities remained, but the sense that a city was a sacred mirror faded. The pattern remained in buildings, laws, streets, ceremonies, archives, and monuments, while the deeper meaning slipped away. Humanity kept the architecture of order and lost the memory of why order was sacred. If Uruk remembered heaven in clay and brick, why did human beings eventually stop seeing the sky reflected in their own cities? Was there ever a place where human suffering had not yet entered the world? The question rises from one of the strangest landscapes in Sumerian myth, Dilmun. Dilmun is not described like an ordinary city of dust, canals, brick, trade, and sweat. It appears as a place of purity, brightness, and extraordinary peace. In the Sumerian imagination, it is associated with the condition before ordinary pain has fully taken hold. There is no sickness as humans know it, no old age in the usual sense, no predatory disorder, no cries of suffering filling the streets. It is not exactly the Garden of Eden. It is not exactly heaven. It is something older and more mysterious, a sacred land where life seems unbroken. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory of a world before loss. In the Sumerian myth often called Enki and Ninhursag, Dilmun is presented as a pure and shining land, yet it is also incomplete. The land needs water. Life must be awakened. Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters, plays a central role in making the place fertile. The story unfolds with divine desire, birth, growth, illness, healing, and the appearance of deities connected to parts of the body. At first glance, the myth can feel strange, even confusing. It does not move like a modern story with a clear moral lesson. It moves like a sacred dream. Images appear, waters flow, plants grow. Divine bodies become landscapes of meaning. Illness enters, healing responds, and at the center of it all is Dilmun, the pure place. Why did ancient people imagine such a land? To answer that, we have to remember the world they actually inhabited. Southern Mesopotamia was not a paradise. It was a place of astonishing fertility, but also hardship. Fields depended on irrigation. Salt could build up in soil. Floods could destroy homes. Disease moved through dense settlements. Infant death was common. Hunger was never far away. Old age came with weakness. War could arrive through the gates. A bad harvest could turn a city anxious. In such a world, a mythic land without sickness or aging was not a decorative fantasy. It was a wound speaking in symbolic form. Dilmun held what ordinary life lacked: purity, freshness, unbroken vitality, a silence before lamentation. Imagine a Sumerian listener hearing the description of a place where the raven does not cry out, the lion does not kill, the wolf does not seize the lamb, and disease does not consume the body. Every image would strike the ancient heart differently than it strikes ours. These were not abstract evils. These were familiar threats. The myth reverses them, creating a sacred mirror of longing. What if humanity carries a memory of wholeness because it lives in brokenness? Modern interpretation must be careful. There is no proof that Sumerians believed all humans once lived in Dilmun and then physically lost it. The myth is not a diary of prehistoric paradise. It is sacred literature. It expresses divine relationships, fertility, purity, and the movement from barrenness to life. But the emotional pattern is unmistakable. Human beings imagine a condition in which the pains of existence are absent. Then they ask why that condition is not here. This pattern appears in many cultures: a golden age, a garden, a first world, an island of blessedness, a land before death, a time before toil. These stories do not prove that such a place existed historically. They prove that humans repeatedly feel exiled from something they can barely name. Is this memory or desire? The answer may be both. A child does not begin life with full knowledge of mortality. The body first knows warmth, hunger, touch, sleep, and the presence or absence of care. The awareness of death arrives later. Aging arrives later. Grief arrives later. Perhaps all paradise myths echo a psychological truth. Every human being once lived before the knowledge of loss became conscious. The Sumerians placed this feeling into sacred geography. Dilmun becomes the location of unbroken life, but it is not static. It must be watered. It must be activated. Even paradise requires a source. Even purity depends on hidden waters. Without Enki's fresh waters, the place remains incomplete. That detail is important. The Forgotten Garden is not self-sufficient. It needs the deep. It needs divine movement. It needs the life-giving force that rises from beneath the visible world. This gives Dilmun an unsettling quality. It is not simply a lost place humans can return to by walking in the right direction. It belongs to a mythic order where purity, fertility, and divine presence must align. A human cannot seize it. A king cannot build it by command. A scribe cannot preserve it completely in signs. The land remains close enough to describe, but far enough to haunt. Ancient trade may have also shaped the memory of Dilmun. In historical Mesopotamian records, Dilmun is associated with a real region connected to Gulf trade, often linked by scholars with Bahrain and nearby areas. Merchants knew Dilmun as a place of exchange: ships, goods, and distance. Myth transformed that known geography into sacred geography. This is how memory changes. A real place becomes a holy image. A trade partner becomes a paradise. A distant island becomes a symbol of what the human world lacks. Could it be that the forgotten memory of paradise was never erased by one event, but slowly displaced by reality? People continued to work, bury their dead, heal the sick, and feed the gods. The dream of a pure land remained, but daily life made it unreachable. The myth preserved the ache without satisfying it. In this way, Dilmun becomes one of the most powerful images in Sumerian tradition. It suggests that ancient people did not accept suffering as ordinary without question. They imagined its absence. They preserved a vision of life before decay, even if only in sacred story. But the myth does not leave purity untouched. Illness enters the divine body. Healing must occur. New deities arise from wounded parts. The Pure Land becomes a place where vulnerability appears. This changes everything. The story does not simply show paradise, it shows paradise becoming complicated. Maybe that is the hidden truth. No remembered garden remains innocent once it is spoken by mortals. The moment humans imagine a place without suffering, they bring suffering into the imagination of that place. They ask how it was lost. They ask why it cannot be restored. They ask who controls the waters. They ask whether healing is possible. The forgotten memory of Dilmun is therefore not only a memory of peace, it is a memory of contrast. Humans know pain deeply enough to imagine its opposite. They know aging deeply enough to dream of agelessness. They know death deeply enough to picture a land where death has not yet spoken. And perhaps that is why this memory feels erased, not because the myth disappeared, but because the human world made it difficult to believe. Every grave, every sickness, every ruined city, every famine, every lament pressed against the dream until paradise became something distant, poetic, almost impossible. Yet impossible things often survive longest in myth. Dilmun still glows in the ancient record like a light seen across water, not a proven homeland, not a map to immortality. A sacred question preserved in the form of a place? Was humanity made for the world as it is? Or does the longing for a painless land reveal that something in us remembers a world that should have been different? Why would a goddess have to pass through 7 gates to reach the land of the dead? The image is unforgettable. Inanna, Queen of Heaven, radiant with divine authority, descends from the upper world into the realm below. She is not dragged there by accident. She chooses to go. She prepares herself. She dresses in symbols of power. She takes divine ornaments, royal garments, and sacred signs of status. Then she approaches the underworld, the domain ruled by Ereshkigal. But the underworld does not welcome power unchanged. At each gate, something is removed. One by one, the signs of Inanna's identity are taken from her. Her crown, her jewelry, her breastplate, her measuring rod and line, her garments. The things that show who she is in the world above are stripped away as she moves deeper into the place from which no ordinary mortal returns. 7 gates, 7 removals, 7 losses. This may be the most haunting symbol in Sumerian literature, because it speaks to something every human being fears, the possibility that death does not simply end the body, but dissolves the identity built during life. In the ancient text known as Inanna's Descent to the Underworld, the goddess leaves her temples and powers above to enter the great below. She instructs her faithful attendant Ninshubur to seek help if she does not return. This detail matters. Inanna is powerful, but not careless. She knows that descent is dangerous. She knows that the underworld has rules. She knows that no one, not even a goddess, enters untouched. The underworld gatekeeper asks why she has come. The answer is connected with Ereshkigal, the queen below, and with rites of death and mourning. But the story does not unfold as a simple visit between sisters or divine relatives. It becomes a ritual of reduction. At each gate, Inanna asks why an item is being taken. At each gate, she is told that the decrees of the underworld must not be questioned. That phrase chills the imagination. The laws below are not open to argument. The descending one must submit. What ancient texts describe is a mythic journey into the underworld, where divine authority from the upper world is gradually removed. What historians see is a story rich with ritual, theology, gendered power, death symbolism, and the relationship between fertility, kingship, and mortality. What modern interpretation can suggest is that the seven gates represent the stripping away of constructed identity, not because the Sumerians wrote a modern psychology manual, because myth often reaches places explanation cannot. A person living in the city has many layers: name, clothing, family, rank, possessions, beauty, strength, occupation, reputation, desire, memory, and ritual status. These layers create the social self. They tell others who the person is. They also tell the person who they are. But death approaches differently. Death does not care about titles. Death does not care about ornaments. Death does not care about beauty, authority, ambition, or praise. The body is taken from public identity into a hidden place. The seven gates dramatize this terror. Imagine an ancient listener hearing the story recited in a temple setting. Inanna enters the first gate. A sign of power is removed. The listener knows this is not merely about a goddess. It is about every king, every priestess, every warrior, every lover, every singer, every mother, every child. Everyone wears things that death will remove. The crown is removed from the ruler. The weapon is removed from the warrior. The necklace is removed from the bride. The seal is removed from the administrator. The voice is removed from the singer. The warmth is removed from the body. The name is all that remains, and even the name depends on memory. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory of descent. Not the memory of having died before, but the ancient awareness that life is a gradual movement toward stripping. Childhood loses innocence. Youth loses certainty. Strength loses ease. Beauty changes. Status can collapse. Wealth can vanish. Friends disappear. The body keeps teaching descent long before the grave opens. Why 7? The number 7 held deep importance across Mesopotamian symbolic worlds. 7 could appear in relation to divine groups, rituals, demons, gates, sages, and cosmic patterns. It is not always one fixed code, but it often signals fullness, completeness, or a structured passage through sacred danger. In Inanna's descent, 7 gates create a complete process. The goddess is not partly humbled. She is completely reduced. By the time she reaches Ereshkigal, she is no longer the radiant queen who entered. She is exposed, vulnerable, and subject to judgment. The underworld does not negotiate with her image of herself. It reveals what remains when image is gone. That revelation is unbearable. And yet, why does the story preserve it? Ancient Mesopotamians did not imagine the underworld as a place of heavenly reward for the righteous in the later sense. It was often dark, dusty, and diminished, a realm where the dead continued in a shadowed condition. This made death not only a biological event, but a change in status, location, nourishment, and memory. The living had obligations toward the dead. Offerings mattered. Neglect mattered. Inanna's descent brings divine drama into that feared space. She crosses a boundary humans cannot freely cross. She sees what the living avoid. She becomes, for a moment, the power above, forced to submit to the law below. Modern viewers may see in this a symbolic map of crisis. A person can descend while still alive through grief, illness, exile, humiliation, depression, loss, or spiritual collapse. Each gate removes something. At first, a person resists. Why is this being taken? Why this relationship? Why this certainty? Why this body? Why this future? But the gate answers, like the underworld. This is the law of the place you have entered. What if the 7 gates are not only about death, but about every transformation that requires surrender? This does not make the myth comforting. It makes it deeper. Because Inanna's descent is not a gentle lesson. It is dangerous, severe, and almost fatal. The underworld is not a metaphor alone. In the ancient account, it is a divine realm with its own queen, rules, attendants, and terrifying authority. Ereshkigal does not exist as a mere shadow of Inanna. She is sovereign below. Her power cannot be bypassed. That is one of the story's most important tensions. The world above does not rule everything. There is another kingdom, a hidden kingdom, a kingdom of endings. Human beings may build cities, preserve names, shape clay, and call upon the gods. But beneath all visible order lies the realm where identity is undone. To forget this is to live on the surface. To remember it is to walk through life with a different kind of seriousness. The 7 gates may preserve the memory that every self is layered, and every layer can be taken. Perhaps this memory was erased because it is too difficult to live with constantly. No society can function if every person sees every garment as temporary, every title as fragile, every possession as already slipping away. So people forget. They dress, they build, they desire, they compete, they decorate the self and call it permanent. But the myth remembers. At the edge of the underworld, the gate still stands. The question is not whether the gates exist on a map. The question is why this image survived with such force. Why did Sumerian scribes preserve a story in which even a great goddess must lose everything before entering the hidden realm? And if Inanna's identity could be stripped away at 7 gates, what part of a human being can pass through loss without being taken? What remains when every symbol of power has been removed? Inanna's descent is often remembered for the 7 gates, but the gates are only the outer structure of the mystery. The deeper terror lies in what is taken at each threshold. Her ornaments are not random decorations. They are signs of identity, authority, beauty, ritual status, divine power, and social visibility. A crown is not just metal. A necklace is not just beauty. A garment is not just cloth. A measuring rod is not just an object. Each item tells the world who she is. Each item allows the world to recognize her. When the underworld removes them, it does not simply undress a goddess. It dismantles an identity. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that the self is partly made of things outside the body. Modern people often imagine identity as something internal. We say, "I know who I am," as if the self is safely hidden inside the mind. But ancient cultures understood identity as something visible, relational, and performed. Clothing, seals, hairstyles, jewelry, weapons, tools, titles, rituals, and public roles were not superficial. They were how society recognized a person's place in the order of life. Inanna descends wearing her world. The underworld takes that world away. This detail changes the story. The descent is not only about death, it is about the stripping of every layer by which a being becomes known. Imagine a queen entering a dark hall. She has prepared herself for authority, Her body is covered with symbols. She is not merely beautiful, she is legible. Every ornament is a sentence. Every garment is a claim. Every sacred object announces that she belongs to the realm of command, desire, and cosmic force. Then the first item is taken. The sentence breaks. At the next gate, another sign is removed. The claim weakens. By the final gate, the Queen of Heaven stands without the visual language that made her queenly. The underworld has made her unreadable. That is the terror, not simply nakedness, but loss of meaning. Ancient Mesopotamian clothing and adornment carried social importance. Elite dress marked rank. Seals marked authority and identity. Ritual garments could distinguish sacred office. Royal objects could represent divine favor and legitimacy. To remove these things was to change how a person existed in public space. The myth turns this social truth into cosmic drama. What happens when no one can see your status anymore? What happens when your title cannot protect you? What happens when beauty has no audience, power has no instrument, and speech has no authority? The underworld answers without pity. This is why Inanna's garments matter. They reveal a truth that human beings often resist. Identity is not only what we feel ourselves to be, it is also what others recognize, what symbols support, what institutions confirm, and what memory preserves. A king without a throne is still a man, but is he still king? A priestess without ritual space is still alive, but can she still act as priestess? A scribe without tablets is still literate, but where does his knowledge live? A warrior without weapons may still be brave, but how does the world read that bravery? The removal of Inanna's ornaments asks all of this silently. Modern interpretation can see these taken garments as layers of the human self. One layer is status, another is beauty, another is skill, another is gendered identity, another is social memory, another is power over others, another is the story one tells oneself. Life removes these layers too. A person loses youth and discovers how much identity depended on being seen as desirable. A person loses work and discovers how much identity depended on usefulness. A person loses wealth and discovers how much dignity had been borrowed from possessions. A person loses reputation and discovers how fragile public memory can be. A person loses a loved one and discovers that part of the self was living inside another person's recognition. Could this be why the myth still feels alive? Because everyone eventually meets a gate that asks for something they thought was permanent. The Sumerian account does not flatter the viewer. It does not say the deepest self is easily found beneath the layers. It shows reduction as frightening. Inanna is not immediately liberated by being stripped. She is endangered. Vulnerability is not romantic. Loss can destroy. That is important. Modern spiritual language sometimes treats surrender as peaceful, as if removing the masks instantly reveals a calm, eternal self. The Sumerian myth is darker. When Inanna is stripped, she enters judgment and death-like stillness. The loss of symbols does not automatically heal her. It exposes her to a power she cannot dominate. The ancient imagination understood that identity protects. Garments protect, names protect, roles protect, rituals protect, possessions protect. Even pride can protect for a time. To lose them is not a simple awakening. It is a crisis. And yet, the story preserves the crisis because something about it is necessary. Inanna cannot enter the realm below as if it were another palace. The rules of upper world power do not function there. A crown that commands in the city is meaningless in the underworld. A necklace admired in the temple has no authority among the dead. A royal garment cannot bribe the gatekeeper of endings. Every realm has its own law. This may be the hidden message of the removed garments. Human beings suffer when they carry the symbols of one realm into another and expect them to work. Wealth may help in the marketplace, but not in grief. Beauty may attract desire, but not stop death. Intelligence may solve accounts, but not erase loneliness. Status may open doors in the city, but not open the gates below. The ancient myth teaches this through image, not lecture. The goddess loses the signs of one world because she has entered another. What memory has humanity forgotten here? Perhaps the memory of limits. Human beings decorate themselves with powers and then forget those powers are conditional. A title works only because others believe it. Money works only inside a system of trust. Beauty works only for a time. Rank works only under a political order. Clothing works only where symbols are understood. Fame works only while memory remains. The underworld is the place where conditions end. That is why it is feared. The garments of Inanna remind us that much of what humans defend is borrowed from the world around them. This does not make identity false. It makes identity relational. A person is woven from body, memory, family, city, language, clothing, work, ritual, desire, and recognition. To be stripped of these is to confront the terrifying question beneath all social life. Who are you when nothing confirms you? The Sumerian myth does not give an easy answer. It leaves the viewer standing at the gate with Inanna, watching the symbols fall away one by one. The sound is not loud. A crown removed, a jewel taken, a garment loosened, a sacred object surrendered. Yet each small act carries the weight of cosmic undoing. In the darkness below, the queen becomes vulnerable. In vulnerability, power changes meaning. Maybe this memory was erased because societies need people to believe in their garments. Kingdoms need crowns to seem permanent. Temples need offices to seem stable. Families need roles to seem natural. Markets need symbols of value to seem real. If everyone remembered how easily the signs can be taken, the entire surface world would tremble. So humanity forgets. It dresses the self again each morning. It fastens the ornaments. It answers to titles. It enters the city, as if the gates will never ask for payment. But somewhere in the oldest clay stories, a goddess is still descending, still surrendering each symbol, still revealing a truth no civilization can fully silence. If everything that makes a person visible can be removed, what hidden witness remains when the final garment falls? Who rules the place no one wants to enter? In the Sumerian underworld, power does not vanish. It changes throne. The realm below is not empty darkness. It has order, law, gates, attendants, judgments, and a queen. Her name is Ereshkigal. She is one of the most formidable figures in Mesopotamian mythology, yet she is often misunderstood because she does not fit the comforting shape of a gentle guide to the dead. She is not merely evil. She is not merely sorrow. She is sovereignty beneath the earth. Ereshkigal rules the great below, the hidden kingdom where the dead pass beyond the reach of ordinary daylight. Her world is not the bright world of feasts, temples, desire, and kingship. It is the place where breath has ended, where status fades, where the living cannot freely walk, and where the great law of mortality becomes undeniable. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory of the Dark Queen. Not a memory of a single historical ruler, not evidence of a secret cult controlling death from underground chambers. The ancient texts describe a mythic queen of the underworld, and her presence reveals how Sumerian imagination gave death a face, a court, and a terrifying dignity. Why would death need a queen? Because what humans fear most becomes more bearable when given form. A nameless void is impossible to address. A queen can be approached, feared, angered, honored, and imagined. She makes the underworld not less frightening, but more intelligible. Death becomes a kingdom rather than pure disappearance. That distinction matters. A kingdom has boundaries. A kingdom has rules. A kingdom has someone who cannot be ignored. Ereshkigal is not simply waiting in darkness as a passive figure. In the descent tradition, her authority is real. The visitor from above cannot overthrow her by shining more brightly. The laws below are hers. The judges and attendants belong to her realm. The great powers of life, sex, battle, and beauty do not cancel the authority of the grave. This is one of the most radical emotional truths in Sumerian myth. Life has its queen, death has its queen, and neither realm can pretend the other does not exist. In the world of ancient Mesopotamia, death was not hidden in the way many modern societies hide it. Burials, offerings, ancestor obligations, laments, ghosts, mourning rites, and family memory kept the dead close to the living. The dead were gone from daylight, but not gone from concern. They required care. They could be neglected. They could trouble the living. Their condition mattered. Ereshkigal gives this entire system a sacred center. She is the ruler of the place where all human difference eventually collapses. The poor, the rich, the young, the old, the king, the servant, the singer, the soldier, the mother, the judge, the scribe, all move toward the great below. This does not mean the ancient Mesopotamians imagined all dead people as identical in every detail, but the underworld had a leveling force. It reduced the living world's bright distinctions. That is why Ereshkigal is frightening. She is the queen of equality no one desires. Modern interpretation can see in her a psychological figure as well. She represents everything the conscious self pushes away: grief, rage, abandonment, decay, confinement, and the knowledge that the body cannot bargain forever. She is the part of reality that refuses decoration. But reducing her to psychology alone would weaken her. In the ancient story world, Ereshkigal is divine sovereignty. She is not a symbol invented for therapy. She belongs to a religious imagination in which the underworld was part of cosmic order. To deny her would be to deny one of the world's necessary powers. And this is where her mystery deepens. Ereshkigal is often associated with pain. In some traditions, she is described in states of anguish, crying out, or experiencing distress. This is not weakness. It gives the underworld emotional depth. The Queen of the Dead is not untouched by the suffering of her realm. She does not rule from a clean throne above misery. She rules from inside it. What if the ruler of death is also the one most surrounded by grief? This changes the meaning of fear. Ereshkigal is terrifying, but she is not shallow. She is the divine face of the place where everything hidden must be felt. Her realm contains not only dead bodies, but unprocessed sorrow, severed relationships, unfinished names, lost children, abandoned offerings, broken kingships, and the dust of every collapsed city. No wonder she is powerful. She holds what the living cannot hold for long. Imagine the underworld not as flame or punishment, but as a vast, dim palace beneath the earth. Its walls are not bright with cedar and gold. They seem made of silence. The air is heavy. Dust lies on the thresholds. The dead move like memories that have forgotten sunlight. At the center sits Ereshkigal, not smiling, not welcoming, not explaining herself. She does not need to persuade anyone. All roads eventually prove her authority. This may be the memory humanity tries hardest to erase. Not death itself, because death is visible everywhere, but the sovereignty of death. People can acknowledge mortality while still living as if death has no kingdom, no law, no claim on identity. They can bury the dead and return quickly to business. They can speak of loss and then drown it in distraction. They can decorate graves while refusing to face the power that graves represent. The Sumerians did not erase the queen. They named her. They placed her below the world and gave her rule. That act is hauntingly honest. A culture that names the Dark Queen admits that existence includes a power no harvest festival can cancel. Life must be celebrated, but death must be recognized. Desire must be honored, but grief must have a throne. Kings must build, but the underworld still waits beneath their foundations. This does not mean Sumerian religion was morbid. It means it was complete in a severe way. It did not allow the upper world to pretend it was everything. The canals, fields, temples, and songs of the living stood above another order, one that could not be bribed by beauty or conquered by pride. Ereshkigal's presence also forces another question. Why is the underworld ruled by a goddess rather than left as a faceless pit? Perhaps because the deepest human fears require relationship. The living cannot form a relationship with nothingness, but they can fear, honor, and narrate a queen. Through story, death becomes part of a cosmos rather than a meaningless accident. Yet the price of this meaning is heavy. If death has a ruler, then death has legitimacy. It is not a mistake outside creation. It belongs to the structure of things. The forgotten memory of Ereshkigal may be the memory that darkness is not disorder alone. It has its own order. Grief is not merely failure. It has its own throne. Endings are not interruptions of reality. They are part of reality's hidden architecture. This is difficult knowledge. It cannot be carried lightly. Perhaps that is why human beings repeatedly cover it over. They prefer stories of conquest, progress, youth, and ascent. They prefer gods of victory, fertility, wealth, and light. But beneath every city, beneath every palace, beneath every field of barley, the Dark Queen waits in the oldest chamber of memory. She is not asking to be loved. She is demanding to be remembered. And if the queen beneath the earth rules what humans fear to know, what do the dead themselves still remember in her silent kingdom? Can the dead be forgotten if they are still hungry? This question lived close to the heart of ancient Mesopotamian fear. Death was not imagined as a clean disappearance. The dead did not simply vanish into nothing, leaving the living free to seal the tomb and continue without concern. In the Mesopotamian world, the dead remained part of a relationship. They had names, needs, memory, and a dangerous closeness to the household that had buried them. The grave was not only an ending, it was a doorway into obligation. Ancient funerary practices show that the living cared about what happened to those who had crossed into the unseen world. Food offerings, libations, burial goods, family rites, and remembrance formed part of the bond between living descendants and dead ancestors. These customs were not identical in every period or city, but the broad concern is clear. The dead required attention. A neglected dead person could become a problem. A remembered dead person could remain integrated into the family's sacred order. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that the dead are not entirely absent. Not in the modern sensational sense of ghosts haunting dark houses for entertainment, not as proof that every ancient ghost story records an actual supernatural event. What ancient Mesopotamian texts describe is a religious and social world where the dead continued in a diminished condition and could affect the living. What archaeologists find are burials, grave goods, tomb structures, and traces of mortuary care. What historians believe is that family continuity, inheritance, memory, and ritual feeding shape the relationship between households and their dead. Modern interpretation can ask something intimate. What if the dead continue? Because memory continues. A parent dies, yet the household still moves around the shape of that absence. A name remains in speech. A tool remains unused. A cup is remembered in a specific hand. A field carries the labor of someone no longer alive. A child grows under stories of ancestors never met. The dead disappear physically, but they keep acting through emotion, property, duty, fear, and identity. The ancient Mesopotamians gave ritual form to this truth. They fed the dead. They poured water for them. They remembered them. In a hot land where thirst was an immediate physical reality, the idea of the dead needing water was especially powerful. Water was not a decorative offering, it was life. To pour water for the dead was to acknowledge that their condition mattered, that the family bond crossed the boundary of breath, that forgetting could become cruelty. Imagine a family at a grave. The city continues around them, somewhere nearby. Merchants argue over goods. A scribe counts barley. Animals stir in the dust. But beside the tomb, the world becomes smaller and older. A libation is poured. A name is spoken. Food is placed. For a moment, the living household expands to include those who no longer answer. This act says something profound. The dead are gone, but not discarded. The memory is fragile because it depends on continuity. Someone must remember the ritual. Someone must know the name. Someone must care enough to return. If a family line fails, if a city is destroyed, if tablets break, if descendants scatter, the dead become vulnerable to erasure. This is one of the saddest ideas in ancient thought. A person can die once in the body and again in memory. The Mesopotamian fear of restless or harmful dead spirits reflects this anxiety. Ghosts could appear in texts as figures needing proper treatment, ritual attention, or appeasement. The problem was not always simple malice. Sometimes the dead were troubling because something was wrong. No burial, improper rites, lack of offerings, violent death, forgotten identity, broken relationship. The living world had responsibilities. Death did not cancel ethics, it extended them. This makes the ancient view very different from a purely private grief. Mourning was not only emotion, it was maintenance, just as canals had to be cleared and temples had to be supplied. The bond with the dead had to be tended. Memory was work. Love became ritual. Family became a bridge across the invisible. Could forgetting the dead be one reason humans forgot themselves? A society that cuts itself off from ancestors loses more than names. It loses warnings, patterns, debts, blessings, and stories of origin. It begins to imagine itself as self-created. It sees the present as everything. It treats the past as decoration or burden. But the ancient household knew better. The living stood on the bones of those who came before. This does not mean every ancestor was honored equally or kindly. Ancient families had hierarchy, conflict, inheritance disputes, and social inequality. Memory could be selective. Some dead were preserved in records. Many vanished completely. Kings built monuments to magnify their names, while countless workers disappeared without inscription. The ancient world remembered unevenly, just as the modern world does. That unevenness creates a disturbing question. Who decides which dead remain human in memory? A royal tomb can hold treasures. A poor grave may hold almost nothing. A king's name can be carved into stone. A laborer's name may be lost before the next season. Yet both entered the same mystery. Both had breath. Both feared hunger, thirst, sickness, and loss. Both became dependent on whether anyone remembered. The dead who still speak do not always speak through voices. They speak through ruins, through bones, through broken offerings, through inherited customs, through myths copied by hands long gone. Every ancient tablet is, in one sense, a voice from the dead. The scribe who pressed the signs is dust, but the mark remains. The hand vanished. The impression survives. Clay becomes the mouth of the dead. This may be why ancient writing feels so uncanny. It allows the dead to speak without breath. A tablet can lie silent for 4,000 years, then be read again under museum light. The person who wrote it is gone beyond recovery. But a thought crosses time, an account of grain, a hymn to a goddess, a school exercise, a curse, a prayer, a myth. Small marks become resurrection of voice. Yet even this resurrection is incomplete. We do not hear tone. We do not know the face. We do not always know the context. The dead speak, but through damage. That damage may be part of the mystery. The ancient dead are not fully restored by archaeology. They are partially encountered. A skeleton reveals age, injury, diet, disease, and burial treatment, but not the full world of dreams. A tablet reveals words, but not the living breath behind them. A tomb reveals care, but not every tear shed beside it. The forgotten memory of the dead is therefore not only that ancestors existed, it is that relationship continues through remembrance. To forget the dead is to break a chain of meaning. To remember them is to accept that the self is not sealed inside one lifetime. A person carries family, city, language, ritual, inherited fear, inherited hope, and the unfinished business of those who came earlier. Maybe this memory was erased because it is heavy. Modern life often demands speed, reinvention, and detachment. The dead slow everything down. They ask for attention. They interrupt progress with obligation. They remind the living that every house is temporary, every body is borrowed, and every name requires someone else to speak it. Ancient Mesopotamia did not let the dead vanish easily. It placed them beneath floors, in graves, in rites, in offerings, in laments, in fear, in duty, and in clay. The dead remained near, and if the dead still required memory, what happened when an entire world was swallowed by water and countless names vanished at once? What kind of flood is powerful enough to drown memory? Not only houses, not only fields, not only animals, walls, roads, temples, and kings. Memory. In ancient Mesopotamia, the flood was not merely a disaster story. It became a wound in time, a boundary between what came first and what had to be rebuilt, a great rupture where human life, divine anger, survival, kingship, and forgotten ages gathered into one overwhelming image. The Sumerians and later Mesopotamians preserved flood traditions in more than one form. These accounts are not identical. They belong to different languages, periods, theological settings, and literary traditions. But the pattern is unmistakable. The world is threatened by overwhelming waters. A chosen human receives warning. A vessel preserves life, and civilization begins again under the shadow of what was almost lost. The flood is one of humanity's most powerful symbols, because water does something fire does not. Fire destroys visibly. Water erases. A flood carries away the boundary stones. It dissolves roads. It turns familiar streets into moving mud. It fills houses with silence. It scatters bodies. It makes fields unreadable. When the waters withdraw, the world is not simply broken, it is unrecognizable. That is why the flood becomes another forgotten human memory, the memory of rupture. A rupture is different from ordinary loss. Ordinary loss removes one person, one house, one season, one king. Rupture breaks the frame that allowed people to understand continuity. It makes the past feel unreachable. Those who survive do not only rebuild structures, they must rebuild meaning. Imagine a city before the waters come. The air is heavy. The river has risen beyond its expected line. Animals sense danger. Workers shout along the banks. Priests look toward the temple. Families gather possessions. But what does one choose when the world itself begins to move? Grain tools, children, images of gods, ancestral objects, tablets, what can be saved when memory must be carried by hand? The ancient flood hero appears in different forms across Mesopotamian tradition. In Sumerian materials, the figure Ziusudra is associated with survival from the flood. In later Akkadian tradition, Atrahasis and Utnapishtim appear in related roles. These are not simple copies of one another. Each tradition reshapes the story according to its own concerns. Yet each preserves the terrifying idea that human existence once approached total erasure. The gods decide, a warning is given, a human listens, a vessel is built, waters come, life survives by a narrow passage. What ancient texts describe is mythic catastrophe and divine decision. What historians believe is that these stories may reflect ancient experiences with devastating floods in riverine landscapes, transformed through theology and literary memory. What archaeologists know is that Mesopotamia did experience flooding, though no single excavated flood layer can be equated simply with every mythic account. The myth is not a newspaper report. It is disaster remembered through sacred imagination. Modern interpretation can ask, why do cultures turn catastrophe into origin? Because after disaster, people need to believe survival has meaning. A flood survivor does not return to normal life. Normal life has drowned. A survivor must decide whether the world is cursed, forgiven, renewed, or permanently wounded. The flood story gives shape to that unbearable question. It says that destruction was not meaningless chaos alone. It belonged to a divine drama, however terrifying. But this answer does not remove the fear. It intensifies it. If the gods could permit such waters once, could they do it again? The flood marks the moment when humanity learns that civilization is fragile. Temples can fall, kings can die, fields can vanish, tablets can dissolve if not fired or protected, oral memory can disappear with the mouths that carried it. Entire lineages can be ended in one season of water. The flood teaches that memory itself needs an ark. This is one of the deepest symbolic connections in Mesopotamian tradition. The vessel that saves life resembles writing in another form. An ark carries living beings through destruction. A tablet carries words through time. Both are containers against oblivion. Both require preparation before disaster. Both preserve fragments, never the whole world. Could writing have become more urgent because people knew how easily the world could vanish? The Sumerian landscape made this fear practical. Water was both life and threat. Irrigation made cities possible, yet uncontrolled water could undo human work. The same element that fed barley could tear through mud brick. The same river that connected trade could carry death. The flood myth gives this double nature a cosmic scale. Water remembers nothing of human ownership. It does not respect a boundary line. It does not pause before a temple door. It does not ask whether a name was noble or ordinary. When the flood rises, hierarchy trembles. This may be why flood stories often feel morally charged. They do not merely describe weather. They raise questions about divine dissatisfaction, human noise, overpopulation, neglect, violence, or imbalance, depending on the tradition. The flood becomes a judgment on a world that has gone wrong, or a reset forced by powers beyond human negotiation. But what exactly was erased? Cities may be rebuilt, fields may be replanted, kingship may return, rituals may resume, yet something after catastrophe is never identical to what came before. Survivors remember terror, but they cannot fully preserve the world that drowned. Children born later inherit the story, not the experience. Then scribes inherit the story from older scribes. Then languages change. Then tablets break. The original scream becomes literature. That transformation is both beautiful and tragic. A myth can preserve the shape of trauma while softening its direct pain. It lets later generations approach the disaster without being consumed by it. But it also creates distance. The flood becomes sacred narrative, then cultural memory, then comparative mythology, then a museum object. The water recedes from lived terror into interpretation. Is that preservation or another kind of erasure? The flood memory survives because it answers a fear that never disappears. Every civilization knows, secretly, that it can be interrupted. War can burn archives. Water can bury cities. Language can die. Disease can empty houses. Political collapse can make old laws meaningless. A people can go from certainty to ruin faster than it believes possible. The ancient flood says this has happened before in the imagination of humanity, and perhaps it will always haunt us because it speaks to a hidden anxiety beneath every act of building. Why raise walls if waters can come? Why record names if tablets can shatter? Why establish kingship if time can sweep away the throne? Why teach children traditions if the world that gave those traditions meaning can disappear? The answer may be that humans build because they know destruction is possible. Memory is not born from safety. Memory is born from the fear of loss. The flood did not erase everything. That is the miracle and the mystery. Someone survived. Something was carried forward. A name, a ritual, a warning, a fragment of divine knowledge, a story of how close the world came to silence. The waters became not only destruction, but the reason memory had to become stronger. Maybe the forgotten memory of the flood is the memory that humanity lives after an interruption it cannot fully reconstruct. Every culture may stand on the far shore of some lost catastrophe, arranging fragments into origin stories. Every archive may be an ark, every myth may be a vessel. Every survivor may carry more than survival. They carry the burden of explaining why they remained when others disappeared. And if the flood divided time into a world before and a world after, why do the ancient lists speak of kings who ruled in impossible ages before the waters came? What kind of king rules for thousands of years? The question sounds like fantasy until it appears inside one of the strangest historical documents from ancient Mesopotamia, the Sumerian king list. This text does not read like ordinary history. It names cities, it names rulers, it speaks of kingship descending from heaven. It arranges power in a sequence, moving from one city to another, as if kingship itself were a sacred force that could travel across the land. Then, in its most mysterious passages, it gives reign lengths that seem impossible to the modern mind. Kings rule for tens of thousands of years. Cities hold kingship for spans that feel closer to mythic time than human time. Then comes the flood. After the flood, kingship descends again. This is not a simple record of government. It is a memory architecture. It tries to organize the ancient past into a meaningful order. But that order moves through myth, politics, theology, and royal ideology all at once. The king list may preserve another forgotten human memory, the memory of time before ordinary time, not proof that individual human kings literally lived for tens of thousands of years. Archaeology and biology do not support that as historical fact. What the ancient text describes is a sacred vision of kingship stretching into a primeval age. What historians believe is that the king list combines political memory, mythic tradition, city rivalry, and the idea that legitimate rule moves according to divine order. But why write history this way? Why place impossible reigns beside recognizable cities? Why join the world of myth to the world of kings? Ancient Mesopotamian kingship was never merely administrative. A king was not only a manager of taxes, armies, canals, and buildings. He stood at the dangerous intersection of human power and divine favor. He restored temples. He protected cities. He judged disputes. He fought enemies. He claimed to act under the gaze of the gods. To say that kingship descended from heaven was to say that rule was not invented by human ambition alone. It had a cosmic source. This made kingship powerful, but also vulnerable. If the gods granted kingship, they could remove it. If one city held kingship, another could receive it later. The king list transforms political change into sacred movement. A dynasty falls not merely because armies weaken or rivals rise, but because kingship has moved. Imagine a scribe copying the list, city after city, king after king, numbers that stretch beyond ordinary life, names that sound like echoes from a vanished age. The tablet becomes a ladder into deep time. At the top, kingship descends from heaven. Then cities rise. Then rulers reign for impossible spans. Then the flood cuts through the sequence like a blade of water. This is not chronology in the modern sense. It is meaning arranged as chronology. The impossible reigns may serve several functions. They may mark the difference between mythic ancestors and later historical rulers. They may magnify the sacred authority of early kings. They may express the idea that the world before the flood was not governed by the same conditions as the world known to later humans. They may also preserve older oral traditions whose symbolic numbers were never meant as ordinary biography. Modern interpretation can see the king list as a map of political memory trying to become universal history. Every city wants its past to matter. Every dynasty wants legitimacy. Every ruler wants to be part of an order older than conquest. The king list gives kingship a single sacred storyline, but this creates another problem. When history is shaped into sacred order, what gets left out? The list remembers kings, not farmers. It remembers dynasties, not mothers grinding grain. It remembers cities, not the unnamed workers who built their walls. It gives power a memory longer than ordinary life. The people who carried baskets, sang laments, buried children, repaired canals, and baked bread disappear behind the names of rulers. This is not unique to Sumer. Many civilizations preserve the names of kings more carefully than the names of the people who sustained them. Royal memory is loud. Ordinary memory is quiet. Tablets and monuments often favor those with the power to commission them. So the king list asks a troubling question when a civilization remembers its past. Whose memory is it preserving? The kings before the flood are especially mysterious because they stand near the border between myth and history. Their reigns are too vast for ordinary human life, yet their cities belong to the cultural imagination of Mesopotamia. They are not placed in an abstract nowhere. They belong to named places Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shurupak, and others depending on the version. The result is uncanny. Mythic time is anchored to real geography. A city becomes a doorway to impossible duration. Could ancient people have experienced time differently in sacred memory? Not biologically, but narratively. A mythic ancestor can contain generations in one name. A reign of thousands of years can express stability beyond personal life. A number can become a symbol of distance rather than a statistic. The ancient mind didn't always separate symbolic truth from historical sequence in the way modern scholarship tries to do. That does not mean ancient people were careless. It means they were asking different questions. Modern history asks what happened, when, and according to what evidence. Sacred king lists ask where does authority come from, how does it pass, and why should the present order be trusted? The king list turns the past into an argument for legitimacy. Yet beneath that argument, something more haunting survives the sense that human society remembers a time too old to measure normally. A time before the flood. A time when kingship was new. A time when the divine world felt closer to political order. A time that later generations could no longer reach except through names, numbers, and mythic sequence. This may be the forgotten memory of deep authority. Humans remember that someone ruled before them. Their rulers remember older rulers. Their cities remember older cities. Their myths remember an age when rule descended from heaven. But no one fully remembers the beginning. The king list tries to solve this by creating a chain. Kingship descends, cities receive it, kings reign, the flood interrupts, kingship returns, continuity survives catastrophe. The message is powerful even after destruction. Order can descend again. But there is also fear inside that message. If kingship can descend, it can depart. If divine favor can be given, it can be withdrawn. If a city can hold power, it can lose it. If pre-flood kings could vanish into myth, every later king is also temporary. This is why the impossible reigns do not only glorify power, they make power ghostly. A king who rules for 36,000 years becomes less like a man and more like a shadow, cast by time itself. He is too large to know, too distant to touch. His name survives, but not his face, his voice, his grief, or his doubts. The king list preserves him and erases him at the same time. Perhaps that is the fate of all memory that becomes official. It keeps structure but loses intimacy. It remembers the throne but not the heartbeat. The kings before the flood remain compelling because they stand where memory fails. They are not ordinary history, yet they are not meaningless fantasy. They belong to that twilight zone where societies preserve the past by enlarging it. They tell us that the ancient Mesopotamians did not see political order as merely human. They imagined kingship as something descending from beyond human hands, moving through cities like a divine current. And if such a current could survive the flood, then perhaps memory itself was also thought to descend from heaven into clay, from myth into list, from vanished cities into scribal hands. But why write these impossible ages down at all? Why not let them remain oral legend? Why press them into clay with such seriousness? Maybe because the scribes knew that without writing, even kings become dust without names. What if writing was invented because the human mind could not be trusted to remember? In ancient Sumer, memory changed shape. For most of human existence, knowledge lived in bodies and voices. A mother taught a child. A singer carried a hymn. A priest repeated a ritual. A farmer remembered the flow of water. A craftsperson learned by watching hands. A ruler's command traveled through speech, gesture, and presence. Then something happened in southern Mesopotamia that altered the destiny of memory itself. Marks entered clay. At first, writing did not appear as long myths carved by poets who already knew they were preserving civilization. The earliest stages of writing were closely tied to administration counting goods, identifying ownership, tracking labor, sealing containers, recording transactions, sheep, grain, beer, oil, textiles, fields, workers, measures. The first written signs were practical, almost humble, but humble marks can become sacred instruments. A mark that begins as accounting can later carry a hymn to a goddess. A sign used to count grain can eventually preserve a story of creation. A tablet that records rations can become part of the same technology that saves a king's name from oblivion. Writing began by helping institutions remember what no single mind could carry alone. A growing city needed records. A temple economy needed accountability. A storehouse needed numbers. A palace needed names. Once society became too complex for memory alone, Clay became an external mind. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that writing was created to defeat forgetting. Not perfectly, not completely, but powerfully enough to change history. Picture a scribe school in the ancient city. The room is warm. Young students press signs into damp clay again and again. Their tablets are not grand monuments. Some are awkward practice pieces. A teacher corrects the signs. A child copies lists of words, professions, objects, gods, cities, animals, and measures. The work is repetitive, demanding, and sometimes severe. Yet something extraordinary is happening. The child is being trained to move memory out of the body and into matter. The reed stylus becomes an extension of thought. The tablet becomes a second memory. The signs become a bridge between living speech and future silence. Cuneiform is often described as wedge-shaped writing because of the marks made by the stylus. But that technical description does not capture its emotional power. These wedges are wounds of memory pressed into clay. Each sign says, "Let this not vanish," when the voice is gone. What ancient evidence shows is that writing developed gradually and changed over time, from early pictographic and numerical systems into a complex script capable of representing language, literature, law, mathematics, astronomy, ritual, and royal power. What historians believe is that the rise of writing was tied to urban administration, temple institutions, economic complexity, and scribal training. What modern interpretation can suggest is that writing made humans aware of a strange new possibility. Memory could survive without the person who remembered. That possibility is almost supernatural. A dead person's words can speak. A vanished city can be named. A ritual can be performed from instructions copied generations earlier. A myth can outlive the people who believed it. A debt can follow someone because a tablet says it exists. Writing gives memory authority outside the living mind. But it also creates danger. Who controls the tablets controls what the city remembers. The scribe is not merely a clerk. The scribe can make things exist in official memory. A field boundary, a ration, a tax, a royal victory, a temple dedication, a legal dispute, a curse, a blessing, a divine hymn. Once written, a statement gains weight. It can be stored, copied, consulted, enforced, and transmitted. This changes power. Before writing, memory depended on human witnesses. After writing, the tablet itself could become a witness. It could accuse, it could confirm, it could preserve, it could exclude. What happens to people whose lives are never written? They become easier to forget. Writing defeats forgetting for some, but not for all. It preserves kings, officials, merchants, priests, scribes, gods, property, and institutions more often than the inner lives of ordinary people. It can record a worker's ration without recording his sorrow. It can list a woman's transaction without preserving her dreams. It can count animals more carefully than emotions. The memory machine is powerful, but selective. This may be one reason ancient writing feels both miraculous and cold. It saves the past, yet it saves it unevenly. It speaks, but often in the voice of institutions. It reveals daily life, but through numbers, lists, contracts, offerings, and formal language. The clay remembers what the system needed to remember. Still, something unexpected happened. Literature entered the archive. Hymns, myths, laments, wisdom texts, proverbs, debates, Royal inscriptions, school compositions, and prayers were copied and recopied. The tablet became more than administration. It became a vessel for imagination. Human beings began pressing not only quantities into clay, but longing, fear, theology, grief, praise, and wonder. That is where writing becomes an arc of consciousness. A flood can destroy a city, but a tablet buried in the right condition may survive. A language can die, yet signs may wait for future readers. A temple can collapse, yet a hymn can emerge from the ruins. A scribe whose name is forgotten may still carry the voice of a goddess across thousands of years. Could any invention be stranger than that? Writing allowed memory to sleep, not vanish, sleep. For centuries, tablets lay beneath dust. Their signs became unreadable. The people who made them disappeared. Later, civilizations inherited fragments, adapted myths, misunderstood older languages, translated divine names, and reshaped inherited stories. Then modern scholars began to decipher the signs, slowly reopening sealed rooms of human memory. The clay had waited. This does not mean writing preserved everything accurately. Scribes made mistakes. Texts changed. Myths existed in variants. Political power shaped records. Some tablets survived by accident. Others were lost forever. Libraries burned. Archives were looted. Excavations damaged contexts. Translation remains difficult. A broken line can change the atmosphere of an entire myth. Writing is not perfect memory. It is damaged survival, and that may be why it feels so human. The mind forgets, clay breaks, yet both keep trying. The forgotten memory of writing is the memory that humans once feared disappearance so deeply that they gave memory a body outside themselves. They created marks that could endure beyond speech. They trusted earth with what the mind could not carry alone. But writing also introduced a new kind of erasure. Once memory depended on tablets. Whatever was not written could fade more easily. Oral traditions, gestures, songs not copied, rituals not recorded, local stories, women's voices, poor households, private griefs, and forbidden knowledge could vanish behind the official archive. The tablet preserves. The tablet also chooses. A city may believe it has defeated forgetting because its storehouses are full of records. Yet beneath those records lies a silence larger than the archive itself. For every tablet recovered, countless tablets are gone. For every name preserved, millions were never written. For every myth copied, another may have died with the last singer who knew it. So writing did not end forgetting. It made forgetting visible. It created a boundary between what survived and what disappeared. It taught humans to look at broken clay and feel the ache of missing lines. It turned absence into something we can see. That is perhaps its greatest power. Not that it remembers everything, but that it shows us how much has been lost. And if writing became humanity's strongest defense against erasure, why did ancient people still believe messages could arrive from dreams, omens, and voices beyond waking memory? Can a dream remember what the waking mind has forgotten? In ancient Mesopotamia, sleep was not always treated as an empty darkness between one day and the next. It could be a threshold, a dangerous opening, a place where gods, spirits, warnings, fears, and hidden truths might enter the human world without passing through ordinary speech. A person might close their eyes in a house of mud brick and wake with terror in the chest. A king might dream before battle. A priest might interpret a symbol. A sufferer might wonder whether a night vision came from a god, a demon, an ancestor, or the disturbed chambers of the heart. Dreams mattered because they arrived uninvited. That alone made them mysterious. In waking life, people controlled much of what they revealed. They chose words, gestures, clothing, tone, and silence. In dreams, another power seemed to speak through images. A river might rise inside the mind, a dead relative might appear, a god might command, a strange animal might stand at a gate, a city might collapse, a star might fall, a door might open into a place never seen by daylight. What was the dream showing? Memory. Warning! Divine message. Inner fear. Ancient Mesopotamian cultures developed traditions of dream interpretation and omen reading. This does not mean every dream was considered equally sacred or reliable. Some dreams could be confused, meaningless, troubling, or deceptive. Others might be treated with seriousness, especially if they involved gods, kings, temples, illness, journeys, or ritual danger. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that consciousness does not belong entirely to waking control. Modern people often divide experience sharply. The waking mind is real. Dreams are private images. Omens are superstition. Night visions are psychological material. But ancient Mesopotamians lived in a world where boundaries were more porous. A dream could be part of a larger web of signs. The gods could communicate indirectly. Hidden knowledge could arrive symbolically rather than plainly. This does not mean ancient people lacked intelligence. It means they inhabited a different map of reality. To them, the universe was meaningful but not always transparent. A sign had to be read, a dream had to be interpreted, a warning had to be recognized before disaster unfolded. Imagine a temple chamber at night. Oil lamps burn low. The smell of incense lingers in the darkness. Someone has come seeking an answer, a sick child, a political decision, a journey, a divine displeasure that needs to be understood. Sleep is no longer ordinary rest. It becomes a ritual risk. The dreamer lies down, not simply to recover strength, but to receive. In that moment, the body becomes a tablet. The dream becomes writing without clay. But dream writing is unstable. It fades quickly. It arrives in symbols. It can frighten, confuse, or deceive. A tablet may preserve signs for centuries, but a dream can vanish before breakfast unless someone speaks it, records it, or acts upon it. This makes dreams a fragile form of memory, perhaps the most fragile of all. And yet, dreams may preserve what official memory excludes. A king's inscription may declare victory, but his dream may reveal fear. A temple hymn may praise divine order, but a dream may show disorder approaching. A person may obey public roles by day, but at night the hidden self may speak in forbidden images. Modern interpretation can see dream traditions as evidence of ancient humanity's sensitivity to the unseen life of the mind. The Sumerians and their successors did not use the language of subconscious conflict or neurological processing, but they recognized that sleep could bring messages beyond ordinary will. The dreamer is both witness and victim. Something appears, and the dreamer must ask whether it came from within, beyond, or both. Could this be why dreams were so unsettling? They collapse the boundary between memory and prophecy. A dream may show a dead person from the past. It may warn of danger in the future. It may reveal a truth the dreamer refuses in the present. No wonder ancient interpreters approached dreams with caution. The dream is never only an image. It is a question who is speaking. In Mesopotamian omen culture, meaning could be found in many events, celestial patterns, birth anomalies, animal behavior, liver divination, storms, eclipses, and unusual occurrences. The world itself could become a text. Dreams belong to this wider habit of reading reality. The universe was filled with signals, but signals required trained attention. This creates a striking contrast with writing. A tablet is made by human hands. A dream is received. A tablet can be stored in an archive. A dream must be remembered by a living mind. A tablet speaks from the past. A dream may seem to speak from a hidden present or a possible future. What if forgotten memories return first as dreams? Not literal memories of lost historical events, but symbolic memories of what a culture has pushed below consciousness: fear of death, guilt over violence, longing for purity, anxiety about divine anger, desire for renewal, terror of abandonment, suspicion that human beings are not fully awake. Ancient dreams could carry the force of the sacred because they bypassed ordinary control. They entered through vulnerability. The sleeping person is defenseless. No crown, weapon, wall, or legal document can stop a dream from appearing. Even a king must sleep. Even a priest can be troubled by night. This makes dreams radically equalizing. The poor dream, the powerful dream, the guilty dream, the grieving dream, the dying dream. In sleep, the city's hierarchy loosens. The hidden images rise. Perhaps this is why dreams seem connected to forgotten memory. They reveal that the mind is layered. The waking self walks through the visible city, but beneath it another city exists: streets of fear, temples of desire, buried chambers of childhood, underworld gates of grief, voices of the dead, waters of origin, nameless symbols waiting in darkness. The ancient Mesopotamians did not need modern psychology to know that night changes the human being. A person can wake from a dream and feel marked. No visible hand touched them, yet the day is different. This is the power of dream memory. It does not always explain itself. It leaves atmosphere. It changes emotion before it changes thought. A dream can make a person avoid a journey, seek purification, consult a specialist, make an offering, fear a god, or remember someone long buried. But dreams can also mislead. This is another reason interpretation mattered. A message without discernment becomes danger. Is the dream divine? Is it illness? Is it anxiety? Is it a ghost? Is it deception? Is it merely the mind digesting the day? Ancient people did not answer these questions casually. They developed traditions precisely because dreams were ambiguous. The forgotten memory here may be the memory of ambiguity itself. Modern life often wants clean categories: real or unreal, true or false, science or superstition, inner or outer. Ancient dream culture lived in a more uncertain space. A dream could be psychologically meaningful, ritually dangerous, socially important, and religiously charged at the same time. Its meaning depended on context, and perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what made dreams sacred. A dream reminds humans that they do not fully govern their own minds. Something speaks when the self is silent. Something assembles images from memory, fear, desire, and mystery. Something opens gates without asking permission. Was that something divine? Was it the deep mind? Was it the echo of the dead? Was it the world itself becoming language? The ancient answer varied, but the question remained powerful enough to shape ritual and interpretation for centuries. Maybe dreams were not erased from human memory. Maybe they were dismissed because they cannot be controlled like tablets, counted like grain, or commanded like workers. They are too fluid, too intimate, too resistant to official order. They belong to everyone and no one. Yet they continue to arrive, night after night. The human mind descends into images it did not choose. The dream may be forgotten by sunrise, but its feeling lingers like water under the earth. And if dreams were one path by which hidden messages reached humanity, why did the people of Mesopotamia also look upward, searching the stars for signs written across the sky? What if the sky was the oldest tablet, long before paper, long before ink, long before modern astronomy separated calculation from sacred fear? The people of Mesopotamia looked upward and saw a written order stretched across darkness. The heavens were not empty space. They were filled with movements, lights, timings, disappearances, returns, warnings, and patterns. The stars did not merely shine. They signaled. The moon did not merely change shape. It measured time. The planets did not merely wander. They seemed to move with intention across the field of night. To the ancient Mesopotamian mind, the sky was not silent. It was legible, but only to those trained to read it. This may be another forgotten human memory, the memory that time itself was once watched as sacred movement. Every city depended on timing. Fields had seasons, rivers had rhythms, offerings had days, festivals had appointed moments, kingship had rituals, journeys had favorable and unfavorable conditions, births, illnesses, eclipses, storms, and strange celestial events could all be folded into the larger question of meaning. When should one act? When should one wait? When has the divine world spoken through the sky? In Mesopotamia, observation of the heavens became one of the most sophisticated traditions of the ancient world. Scribes and scholars recorded lunar phases, eclipses, planetary movements, omens, and calendrical cycles. Over many centuries, these traditions developed into detailed astral sciences, especially in later Babylonian contexts. This was not modern science in the strict contemporary sense, because celestial observation was often bound to omen interpretation, kingship, ritual danger, and divine communication. Yet it required patience, discipline, memory, mathematics, and careful watching. The sky trained the mind to think in cycles. A star disappears, then returns. The moon dies into darkness, then grows again. The seasons circle. The river rises and falls. A king dies, another rises. A city falls, another claims power. What if humans once understood themselves not as isolated lives, but as participants in repeating patterns? This is not the same as saying the Sumerians believed everything was predetermined in a simple way. Ancient Mesopotamian thought was complex. Divine decisions, rituals, omens, human action, and fate interacted. Signs could warn, but warnings could invite response. A bad omen did not always mean passive surrender. Ritual action might be taken. The sign mattered because it gave knowledge before danger fully arrived. The sky was therefore not only beautiful, it was strategic. It offered time to prepare, Imagine a night on the flat Mesopotamian plain. The city has quieted. Fires burn low. Dogs move in alleys. A temple tower rises like a dark mountain against the stars. Above it, the moon hangs over the riverlands, and trained watchers study the heavens. Their eyes search for order in darkness. A cloud passing over the moon may create anxiety. An eclipse may tremble through the kingdom. A planet appearing at a certain place may be recorded with seriousness. To modern eyes, this may look like superstition. To ancient eyes, it was attention, and attention is one of the deepest forms of memory. The sky rewards memory because no single night explains the heavens. One must compare. One must remember what happened last month, last year, in the reign of another king, in the records of older scholars. A celestial sign gains meaning because it belongs to a chain of observations. Without memory, the sky is only glitter. With memory, it becomes pattern. This may be why the stars feel connected to forgotten knowledge. They seem ancient beyond human life, yet they return with reliable rhythm. They outlast kings, they outlast cities. They watch silently while temples rise and fall. A person born under one sky dies under the same vault, though the city beneath may change completely. The stars are memory without speech. The moon is memory with a face. The calendar is memory made social. Ancient Mesopotamians organized time through lunar months, intercalation, festivals, and agricultural needs. Time was not an abstract line stretching infinitely forward. It was marked, watched, adjusted, and ritually inhabited. To lose the calendar would be to lose coordination with the gods, the fields, the city, and the dead. Modern interpretation can see this as a profound human achievement. By reading the sky, people learn to place their short lives inside larger cycles. A single human memory is brief. A written archive can reach further. But celestial cycles reach beyond any dynasty. They give the illusion, or perhaps the comfort, that something remains ordered even when the earth below is unstable. Yet the sky also terrifies. An eclipse interrupts expectation. A strange omen unsettles the king. A planet's movement may be interpreted as warning. The heavens are orderly, but not always comforting. They can announce danger. They can reveal that the kingdom is exposed to powers above politics. This creates a tension at the heart of astral memory. The sky promises order. The sky also reveals vulnerability. A king may command armies, but he cannot command the moon. A priest may perform rituals, but he cannot stop an eclipse by authority alone. A scribe may record a sign, but he cannot force the heavens to explain themselves plainly. The forgotten memory here may be the memory of dependence on cosmic rhythm. Human beings once watched the sky because survival, ritual, kingship, and meaning depended on knowing when the world was aligned or disturbed. To stop watching was not just to lose astronomy, it was to lose orientation. Could modern humanity be suffering from a different kind of sky-forgetting? Cities now fill the night with artificial light. Many people rarely see the Milky Way. Time is kept by devices, not moonrise. Seasons are softened by technology. Calendars appear on screens, detached from stars, rivers, and ritual. The sky remains above us, but it no longer governs imagination in the same way. This is not simply progress or loss. It is transformation. Modern astronomy has revealed a universe far larger and stranger than ancient observers could have imagined. It has given extraordinary knowledge through mathematics, telescopes, physics, and space exploration. But something else has faded the feeling that the visible sky is speaking directly to human life. The ancient Mesopotamian sky was intimate. It watched kings. It warned cities. It measured offerings. It entered dreams, omens, and political decisions. It was not remote emptiness. It was a ceiling of signs. This intimacy could also be dangerous, because it placed enormous interpretive power in the hands of specialists. If only trained scholars could read the heavens, then rulers depended on them. A celestial omen could affect royal policy. Knowledge of the sky became knowledge of power. Again, memory and authority join hands. Who remembers the patterns? Who interprets the warning? Who decides whether the sign applies to the king, the city, the enemy, the harvest, or the temple? The heavens may be above everyone, but the reading of heaven is never neutral. This is why the sky as tablet is such a powerful image. A clay tablet can be copied, hidden, altered, broken, or controlled. The sky cannot be locked in an archive. Everyone can see it, yet not everyone is trained to read it. Its signs are public and secret at the same time. Perhaps that is what made it sacred. The forgotten memory of the stars is not just the memory of ancient astronomy. It is the memory that human life once felt, embedded in cosmic timing. People were not floating through meaningless days. They were living beneath cycles that demanded attention. A dark moon could mark transition. A full moon could fill the city with ritual brightness. A returning star could announce a season. An eclipse could make the palace tremble. A calendar could turn chaos into order. But if the sky was a tablet, it was written in a language no human invented. That fact alone made it different from all other forms of memory. Clay preserves what humans press into it. The sky preserves patterns humans discover but do not create. And if the heavens kept their signs across centuries, why did the meaning of older Sumerian words begin to fade when later cultures inherited them? Can a memory survive when its language dies? This is one of the quietest disasters in history. A city can burn loudly, a flood can roar, a king can fall in violence, but a language can disappear slowly, almost silently. Fewer children speak it. Fewer households use it. Fewer prayers are said in its natural rhythm. It remains in temples, schools, inscriptions, and old tablets, but not in the breath of ordinary life. Then one day, a language is no longer a living world. It becomes something studied, something copied, something translated, something powerful, but distant. This happened to Sumerian. Sumerian did not vanish at once. It continued to be used for learned, liturgical, scribal, and ceremonial purposes long after it was no longer the main spoken language of daily life. Akkadian, a Semitic language, became dominant in much of Mesopotamia. Yet Sumerian remained prestigious. It was copied in schools, used in religious compositions, preserved in lexical lists, and treated as a language of ancient authority. That survival is remarkable. But survival through scholarship is not the same as living speech. When a language stops being spoken naturally, something changes inside memory. Words remain, but their warmth cools. Grammar can be taught, but instinct fades. A phrase once understood by a child at home becomes an exercise for a trained scribe. A hymn once heard as living devotion becomes a composition requiring explanation. The 18th forgotten memory may be the memory lost in translation, not because translation is betrayal in a simple sense. Translation can rescue texts from silence. Without later scribes, interpreters, and modern scholars, much of Sumerian literature would remain unreadable. Translation is a bridge, but every bridge crosses a distance, and distance changes what is carried. Ancient Mesopotamia was multilingual and culturally layered. Sumerian and Akkadian interacted for centuries. Divine names moved between languages. Myths were adapted. Older stories were reworked. Scribal schools preserved bilingual lists. Later Babylonian and Assyrian scholars inherited Sumerian as a language of prestige and antiquity. This created a strange situation. The past was preserved by people already separated from it. Imagine a young Akkadian-speaking scribe copying a Sumerian hymn. He learned signs, pronunciations, equivalents, old forms, divine names, and traditional phrases. His hand is disciplined. His memory is trained. He may revere the text deeply, yet the language he copies is not the language of his mother's casual speech. It is sacred, difficult, ancestral. He preserves the old words, but through a new mind. Is that memory or transformation? Both. This is how civilizations inherit themselves. Nothing passes forward unchanged. Every generation receives damaged treasures, myths with missing lines, rituals with forgotten explanations, names whose original meanings have blurred, symbols whose first emotional force is gone. People do not preserve the past by freezing it. They preserve it by reusing it, and reuse always alters. Sumerian texts underwent this fate. A myth could be copied in a later period for school training. A divine title could be glossed. A word could be explained through another language. A story could influence Akkadian literature, then later traditions, then modern reconstructions. Each stage keeps something alive, but each stage also moves it farther from the first voice that uttered it. The listener must feel the tragedy of this. A tablet may survive. The sound world may not. The sign may remain. The accent disappears. The word may be translated. The sacred shock may weaken. This is not only an ancient problem. It happens whenever one culture inherits another. Egyptian stories were read by Greeks. Mesopotamian motifs entered later Near Eastern traditions. Hebrew texts arose in conversation with broader ancient West Asian worlds. Greek authors remembered older Eastern wisdom through their own categories. Modern readers approach all of them through translations, museums, documentaries, and fragments. Meaning travels, but it changes clothing at every border. What if one of humanity's forgotten memories is not hidden in a lost temple, but trapped between languages? A single Sumerian word may carry layers that no English word can hold. A divine concept may be social, legal, cosmic, and ritual at once. A term connected to life, fate, breath, wisdom, purity, or underworld existence may resist clean translation. When translators choose one word, they illuminate one path and darken another. This is not a failure of scholarship. It is the nature of language. Every translation is an interpretation. That is why ancient memory feels both close and unreachable. We can read myths of creation, descent, flood, kingship, and divine power. We can follow plots. We can compare versions. We can analyze grammar. Yet we are still standing outside the first emotional universe of the text. We do not hear the festival crowd. We do not know every gesture. We do not feel every pun, every sacred echo, every local association. The tablet speaks, but it speaks through a veil. Modern interpretation can see this as a deeper form of erasure than broken clay. A shattered tablet announces its damage. A missing line leaves a gap visible to the eye. But translation loss is subtler. The sentence appears complete. The viewer may think the mystery has been solved. Yet beneath the translated words, older meanings remain partially hidden. This can create dangerous confidence. A person reads one English phrase and believes they have understood the ancient mind. But the ancient mind lived inside sounds, symbols, rituals, social structures, landscapes, gods, jokes, fears, and assumptions that cannot be fully transferred. The translation opens the door, but the house inside is still dim. This matters deeply for the idea of forgotten memories. If ancient texts preserve symbolic memories of origin, name, labor, breath, civilization, paradise, death, flood, kingship, writing, dreams, and stars, then language is the vessel carrying them. When language shifts, the memories do not vanish completely. They mutate. A sacred power becomes a law. A divine decree becomes a destiny. A ghost becomes a spirit. An underworld becomes a netherworld. A ritual office becomes a technical term. A goddess becomes a character instead of a presence. The words are understandable, but the world behind them has moved away. The erasure is not always intentional. No enemy has to scrape the tablet. No priest has to hide the text. Time itself translates. Empire translates. Education translates. Religious change translates. Trade translates. Conquest translates. Modern publishing translates. Humanity forgets by replacing living meanings with useful equivalents. Yet there is also hope here, because the same process that erases also preserves. Later scribes did not let Sumerian vanish completely. They copied it. They honored it. They built lexical tools. They treated it as worthy of study. Their distance from the language allowed it to become ancient memory rather than ordinary speech. Sometimes reverence begins when familiarity ends. The language no longer belongs to daily life, so it becomes sacred. This can be seen in many cultures. Old languages survive in ritual after ordinary speech changes. They become powerful precisely because they are no longer common. Their obscurity creates atmosphere. Their difficulty suggests depth. Their preservation becomes an act of devotion, but devotion can also freeze memory. A living language changes naturally. A sacred dead language is copied carefully, sometimes without full understanding. The words survive as forms, while their living roots fade. The past becomes more stable and less alive at the same time. This is the paradox of Sumerian memory. It survived because it became ancient. It became ancient because it stopped living in ordinary mouths. Somewhere between preservation and loss, the old words waited in clay. And when modern readers approach them, we are not recovering pure memory. We are participating in a long chain of partial awakenings. Sumerian speakers, Akkadian scribes, temple scholars, buried tablets, excavators, copyists, philologists, translators, museum curators, and viewers all stand between the first composition and the present imagination. The memory reaches us, but it has passed through many hands. Maybe the 18th forgotten memory is the memory that language itself is a fragile body. It can carry gods, kings, grief, desire, law, and underworld terror. It can outlive empires and signs, but it can also lose breath. A word without its living world becomes like a statue without its temple still powerful, still beautiful, but surrounded by absence. And if every ancient memory has reached us through damaged language, how can the 7 hidden memories be reassembled without pretending the fragments are whole? How do scattered fragments become a map? The ancient record does not hand us a single tablet titled "The 7 Forgotten Human Memories." No responsible reading can claim that Sumerian scribes wrote such a doctrine in a clear numbered list. That would turn mystery into invention, and invention into false history. The real mystery is subtler. Across myths, rituals, city traditions, divine stories, underworld journeys, creation accounts, flood memories, king lists, writing systems, dream practices, and sky observations, certain patterns return with unusual force. They are not presented as one formal system. They appear like buried stones in a ruined road. One stone alone may seem accidental, but when enough stones align, the mind begins to wonder whether an ancient pathway once passed there. This is where the 7 memories can be reassembled as a symbolic framework, not as established Sumerian doctrine, not as secret history, as an interpretive map drawn from recurring Mesopotamian themes. The first memory is origin. Humanity is shaped from earth, clay, divine intention, and sacred purpose. The body belongs to the ground, yet its story begins in the imagination of the gods. This memory asks the oldest question, what are humans made for? It does not answer with modern biology, and it does not remove mystery with easy certainty. It places humanity between mud and heaven, matter and command, dust and meaning. To forget origin is to awaken in the middle of existence and mistake the middle for the beginning. The second memory is hidden wisdom. In the figure of Enki and the deep waters of the Abzu, knowledge is not always above, visible, and public. It is submerged, guarded, life-giving, and dangerous. The world appears solid, but its source is fluid. Wisdom rises like water through channels, rituals, dreams, and sacred speech. Humans drink from it, depend on it, and fear it. To forget hidden wisdom is to believe that only surface knowledge is real. The third memory is the name. In ancient Mesopotamia, names carried identity, authority, survival, and presence. A name could preserve the dead, legitimize a king, invoke a god, or anchor a person inside family and city. Losing a name was not a small loss. It was an approach toward non-being. This memory asks whether humans once understood identity as something sacredly received, not merely privately invented. To forget the name is to become visible without knowing what one is called in the deeper order of things. The fourth memory is labor. Humanity appears in several Mesopotamian creation traditions in connection with work, service, and the maintenance of divine and earthly order. This is not a simple modern claim of enslavement, and it should not be flattened into sensational theories. In the ancient imagination, labor was cosmic. Canals, offerings, fields, temples, bread, and brick all belong to the struggle against chaos. To forget labor is to feel the burden of work while losing the memory of its sacred purpose. The fifth memory is breath. Clay alone is silent. The living body is a mystery. Ancient Mesopotamian thought did not define life in modern scientific terms, but it surrounded the body with ritual, vulnerability, sickness, death, ghostly existence, and divine dependence. Breath, presence, animation, and mortality made the human body a threshold between earth and the unseen. To forget breath is to treat life as possession instead of gift. The sixth memory is civilization, the Sumerian concept of the Mai, the sacred powers and ordinances associated with culture, reveals a stunning intuition. Civilization is made of invisible forces: kingship, craft, music, judgment, priesthood, desire, weapons, lamentation, and wisdom are not neutral tools. They are powers that shape humanity. They can order life or deform it. To forget civilization is to inherit power without remembering the discipline that power requires. The seventh memory is loss. This final memory gathers paradise, descent, death, flood, and underworld sovereignty into one severe truth. Human beings remember a pure place and live outside it. They wear identities and watch them stripped away. They build cities, and no water can erase them. They honor the dead because the dead are not entirely gone. They imagine a queen below because death cannot be dismissed as an accident. To forget loss is to live as if endings are interruptions rather than part of the architecture of existence. These seven memories are not seven hidden files inside the ancient mind. They are seven recurring pressures in the literature and religious imagination of Mesopotamia. They show what the human condition felt like when viewed through Sumerian and later Mesopotamian symbols. Origin, wisdom, name, labor, breath, civilization, loss. Together, they form a portrait of humanity unlike the modern self-image. The modern person often imagines the self as independent, self-directed, rational, and separate from the sacred order. The ancient Mesopotamian human appears differently formed, named, obligated, animated, instructed, civilized, watched, and eventually drawn into the realm of the dead. This does not mean ancient people had no individuality. They loved, feared, desired, complained, prayed, negotiated, mourned, and hoped. Their letters, proverbs, legal cases, and personal names reveal human texture, but their myths placed individual life inside a much larger network. No person stood alone. The gods, city, ancestors, language, stars, rivers, rituals, and dead all pressed upon the self. The forgotten memories are therefore not only about the past. They expose what modern people may have forgotten about being human. What if origin cannot be replaced by personal ambition? What if wisdom cannot be reduced to information? What if a name is more than branding? What if work requires meaning to remain humane? What if life is not owned but entrusted? What if civilization must be morally remembered to avoid becoming machinery? What if death is not an error in the system, but the shadow that gives urgency to every act of love? These questions are not answered by archaeology alone. Archaeology gives material traces: tablets, graves, temples, tools, seals, ruins, bones, burned layers, and city plans. Texts give sacred imagination: gods, decrees, underworld gates, flood heroes, divine powers, creation scenes, laments, and hymns. History gives context: institutions, languages, kingship, economy, scribal schools, ritual traditions, and political change. Interpretation stands between them, and interpretation must remain humble. The danger in a subject like this is that mystery can become exaggeration. Ancient Sumerian texts are already astonishing without adding false claims to them. They do not need invented secrets to feel profound. Their real power lies in how deeply they understood human vulnerability. They knew that memory breaks. They knew that names vanish. They knew that cities fall. They knew that power is borrowed. They knew that bodies return to dust. They knew that civilization depends on invisible agreements. They knew that the dead remain present as obligation. They knew that humans live inside a story older than themselves. Perhaps this is why these symbolic memories feel erased. They were not necessarily removed by a single priesthood, hidden in a sealed chamber, or destroyed by one conquering army. Some were covered by time, some were transformed by language, some were softened by translation, some were replaced by later religious systems. Some became too uncomfortable for societies built on speed, expansion, consumption, and forgetfulness. The erasure may not have happened once. It may happen every day, every time a person treats the body as a machine. Breath is forgotten. Every time a society treats work as extraction, labor is forgotten. Every time a city treats law as control without sacred responsibility, civilization is forgotten. Every time the dead are reduced to data, ancestry is forgotten. Every time the sky is hidden by artificial light, cosmic rhythm is forgotten. Every time language becomes a tool without reverence, names are forgotten. Every time origin is dismissed as irrelevant, the first question returns unanswered. This is why the Sumerian fragments still matter. They do not give modern humanity a simple doctrine to recover. They give a mirror, broken, ancient, incomplete, but still capable of reflecting something uncomfortable. The human being in these texts is not a master standing above creation. The human being is clay carrying memory, a worker carrying divine burden, a named creature fearing erasure, a breathing body moving toward dust, a citizen of fragile cities, a dreamer beneath speaking stars, a mourner feeding the dead, a survivor after waters, a reader of signs whose meanings are never fully possessed. Maybe the 7 memories were never erased completely. Maybe they were scattered across myth, so no single loss could destroy them. If one tablet broke, another image survived. If one language faded, a ritual remained. If one city fell, another copied the story. If one god's name changed, the underlying question continued. That may be the genius of myth. It does not preserve truth like a locked box. It preserves truth like seed, buried, dormant, waiting for the right conditions. But if the memories can be reassembled only through fragments, symbols, and careful interpretation, who scattered them in the first place? Time, power, fear, or the human mind itself? Why were they erased? This is the question that turns the entire mystery from ancient history into something more personal. Because the deeper we look into the clay tablets, temple ruins, underworld myths, flood memories, divine names, and sacred cities of Sumer, the less the word erased feels like a single event. No one tablet gives us a scene where 7 memories are taken from humanity and hidden forever. No ancient scribe leaves a confession saying, "Here is what we removed." No excavated temple chamber has revealed a secret archive explaining why humans forgot their origin, their name, their breath, their labor, their lost wholeness, their sacred civilization, and their relationship with death. That kind of certainty would be false. The real mystery is more unsettling because it is more human. Memories can be erased without being burned. They can be buried under new languages. They can be softened by ritual repetition until people perform the gesture but forget the first terror behind it. They can be absorbed into later religions, translated into new symbols, renamed by conquerors, misunderstood by descendants, or reduced by modern readers into simple myths, they can also be erased because people cannot bear them. Who wants to remember every morning that the body is clay awakened for only a little while? Who wants to remember that work was once imagined as a cosmic burden, not merely a career? Who wants to remember that names vanish unless someone speaks them? Who wants to remember that civilization is not neutral, that every law, title, weapon, song, office, and ritual carries power? Who wants to remember that death is not an interruption at the edge of life, but a kingdom beneath it? Perhaps humanity forgets, because forgetting allows daily life to continue. The farmer cannot stand in the field all day contemplating mortality. The scribe cannot copy every tablet while trembling before the abyss of lost language. The king cannot rule if he thinks constantly of buried kings before the flood. The mother cannot feed a child while staring forever into the mystery of breath. The builder cannot raise a temple wall while imagining the flood that may one day bring it down. To live, humans must narrow the mystery. They must make breakfast. They must repair the canal. They must open the market. They must bury the dead and return to the living. Forgetting is not always ignorance. Sometimes it is survival. But there is another kind of forgetting, more dangerous than mercy. It begins when symbols remain, but their meaning is hollowed out. The city continues, but no longer remembers sacred order. Work continues, but no longer remembers purpose. Language continues, but no longer remembers reverence. The dead are named, but no longer felt as obligation. The sky remains overhead, but no one looks up long enough to feel time moving through it. This is how erasure becomes invisible. Nothing appears to be missing. The buildings stand. The records remain. The rituals continue. The words are translated. Yet the inner memory has gone quiet. Ancient Sumer stands at the beginning of recorded history, not because it had all answers, but because it left behind some of the oldest surviving human questions. The scribes pressed signs into clay, and those signs outlived them. The temples fell. The languages changed. The gods were renamed, reinterpreted, abandoned, studied, revived in imagination, and placed behind museum glass. But the questions remained. What is a human being? Who shaped us? Why do we work? What gives breath to clay? Why do cities rise and collapse? Why do we dream? Why do the dead remain close? Why do we long for a world without suffering? Why does every civilization build as if it will endure, while knowing that time is already gathering at its gates? These are not small questions. They are the kind that no empire can answer permanently. They return because they belong to the structure of consciousness itself. The 7 forgotten memories are therefore not hidden like treasure under a temple floor. They are hidden in plain sight, scattered across human experience. A child receiving a name, a worker exhausted at sunset, a mourner pouring water for the dead, a city glowing at night, a person waking from a dream with fear in the chest, a body drawing breath without knowing why, a civilization recording itself because it is afraid to disappear. The Sumerians did not erase these things. They preserved them in myth. Time erased the context. Power erased some voices. Translation erased some meanings. Modern speed erased some attention. Fear erased the willingness to look directly. And the human mind erased whatever was too heavy to carry every hour of the day. Yet erasure was never complete. That is why the clay still matters. A broken tablet is not silence. It is wounded memory. A missing line does not end the story. It reveals the shape of loss. A ruined temple is not only a failure of architecture, it is proof that people once believed heaven could touch earth through brick, song, offering, and ritual order. The opening mystery began with clay, because clay is the perfect symbol for the human condition. It is soft enough to receive an impression, fragile enough to break, common enough to be overlooked, and strong enough, under the right conditions, to outlive kings. Perhaps humanity is the same, marked by forces it does not fully remember, breakable, ordinary, yet capable of carrying mysteries across impossible distances. The question is not whether Sumerian texts prove that 7 literal memories were removed from the human mind. They do not. The question is why their myths preserve so many images of partial knowledge, lost wholeness, divine distance, sacred labor, fragile identity, underworld descent, catastrophic rupture, and memory struggling against oblivion. That pattern is real enough to disturb us. Maybe the ancient scribes were not hiding a doctrine. Maybe they were doing something more powerful. They were preserving a warning in the only form that could survive the death of their world story. A story can cross languages imperfectly. A story can sleep under dust. A story can be misunderstood and still endure. A story can wait until a later generation feels the same fear and recognizes itself in the old symbols. Whether these ancient memories were buried by time, transformed by culture, or protected inside myth, they still ask the same final question. If humanity forgot these memories because they were too heavy to carry, what happens when we begin to remember them again?